Chapter 101. Some things could be big or small, and no one would pursue it if it was not revealed, but if Amon insisted on clinging to this loophole, it would not be a good thing if it involved the dignity of the gods. If the temple of Isis was brought to the adoratress and she needed to establish her authority, such an excuse would be the most severe punishment. Poira couldn't sit still anymore. He hurriedly stood up, grabbed Amon's sleeve and begged, "Sir, I sincerely ask for your forgiveness. Please don't be calculative about the unintentional slip of the tongue of a warrior. If you have any request, please tell me." Amon finally smiled. He waved his hand and said, "Sit down and talk. In fact, I don't have any other requests. All the lords here are loyal to their duty. I don't want to make trouble out of nothing. I just hope that my people can be treated better." Poira quietly wiped his sweat. He pulled John up and sat down with him. They toasted Amon together. He promised, "Please rest assured that what happened today will never happen again. I will do my best to take care of the miners. They are indeed important to Mount Horeb. They deserve special treatment." Amon asked again, "I was injured today. I need to rest here for a few days. The adoratress gave me a month's time. I'm not in a hurry to complete my mission. During this time, I hope to meet my people and ask them about their experiences. Is that convenient?" John nodded. "Of course it's convenient. As long as you don't take them away, nothing else matters here." That night, Amon was reading a book on the art of war in his bedroom upstairs. He looked out of the window thoughtfully. It was a full moon. The silhouette of the moon hung over the ridge in the distance. Even the shadows in the bright light were so clear. Under the moonlight, Mount Horeb had a faint smell of smoke and fire, just like the smell of Duk a long time ago. Amon seemed to be waiting for someone. When the moonlight shone through the window, the guard outside the door reported, "Mr. Amon, someone wants to see you." Amon smiled and said loudly through the door, "Is it Guard Captain John? Please come in. I've been waiting for you." The person who came was indeed John. He entered the room and bowed to express his apology for disturbing his rest so late at night. Amon smiled and said, "Since Lord Guard Captain has come to visit alone at night, you must have a personal request. If you have anything to say, just say it." John said, "First of all, I want to express my gratitude. You did not hurt me in the duel, and have forgiven me for my unintentional mistake. Actually, I regretted it, but I was in a state of irritation that I couldn't control." Amon nodded. "I can tell. You were like two different people back then. If you were always so hot-tempered and impulsive, you wouldn't have been able to reach the 6th rank in physical skills. Did you come to find me for this matter?" John opened his mouth and said with some surprise, "Mr. Amon, you are so amazing. You saw through my intention at a glance." "Yes, that's the situation. There has always been an irrepressible restlessness in my soul. Sometimes I even lose my mind and just want to vent my power. I try to control it, but it is always difficult to avoid it. You still don't know what I've been through, do you?" John was born in a large noble family in Montefiore. His uncle was the current head of the agriculture department in Montefiore, a very prominent position. When he was 16 years old, he was brought to the temple and accepted the power awakening ceremony. What was awakened was the power in his bloodline. Thus he became a warrior and had the best coach to teach him body arts and various martial arts. He regretted not becoming a mage. For a long time, he asked himself if the gods had abandoned him. Why didn't the gods give a noble soul like him a chance? His grandfather used to be a supreme mage, an honorary high priest of the temple of Isis. John had always been proud of him. In this case, he was determined to become the best warrior. But after awakening the power in his blood, with the progress of his body arts, his spirit became more and more irritable. He would always act on impulse because of small things. Although he regretted it afterwards, he couldn't suppress it and was in a state of losing control. 2 years ago, in a brothel in Montefiore, he lost his noble demeanor and injured a colleague and the owner of the brothel because of a dispute over who should drink with a girl. When he returned home, he was still angry and accidentally injured his wife, who tried to persuade him. His wife came from another noble family in Montefiore. She left him in anger and went back to her mother's home. He was also punished. His family used their connections to send him to Mount Horeb, hoping to temper his temper in this desolate place. John admitted that he was depressed in Mount Horeb. This desolate place made him feel even more desolate. His prayers to the gods could not be truly comforted. Yesterday, when he was drinking, he heard that Ammon was not a noble, but came to inspect Mount Horeb. He was not happy. This afternoon, when he saw someone accidentally damage a parangan while mining, he was immediately angry. He could not help but whip people. This had happened more than once in Mount Horeb. Not only the slaves and craftsmen, but also many of his guards had been whipped by him. It seemed that this kind of venting could soothe his mood, but it also meant that he was more restless. John said at last, "Today, when you hit me with your hammer, the strange impact seemed to disperse my power. I calmed down at that moment. You were also angered by me. If I were you, I would not have been able to control my power so perfectly. I did not hurt anyone at all. Is this the technique of Duk? How do they control their power? To be able to smash such a hard ore into powder and leave a parangan intact, there must be something special about it. The attack you gave me today suppressed my restlessness, so I came to ask you for advice. Do you have any way to help me?" Ammon listened and gradually frowned. He had experienced this feeling before. It was when he had just awakened the power of the two sides. At the same time, the desire and restlessness of the two sides were awakened. He remembered that in Duk he always wanted to find someone to beat him up. But after he passed the test, the restlessness disappeared and did not continue. But John's situation was special. The restlessness was forcibly suppressed, but it did not disappear. As his power increased, it became stronger and stronger. He was a warrior of the 6th level. Naturally, he had to pass all kinds of tests. But no one had systematically summarized the tests of body arts, so he did not understand the situation he was facing. Fortunately, the person he asked today was Ammon. Since he had asked, Ammon would definitely try to help him. His clansmen were still on Mount Horeb. As long as Ammon left, the fate of Moses and the others would depend on John and Poira. He looked out of the window and pondered. "John, is there a pattern to your restlessness?" John thought for a moment and answered, "Yes. The stronger I am, the stronger the restlessness. On the other hand, it is periodic. It seems to break out with the waxing and waning of the full moon. Today is the night of the full moon, so the restlessness is the most obvious. I have prayed to the goddess of moonlight, but it does not seem to work." Ammon turned around and sat down. He looked at John and said, "Perhaps what has been awakened is not only the power of faith, but also the restlessness hidden in your soul. It is like two sides of the same coin. The restlessness will also awaken, but you do not know how to face it. It comes from the doubt and anxiety in your soul. You have desires that are never satisfied and you cannot let go, but you do not even realize it. There is a hidden devil in your heart, but you do not see it. All of this is just my judgment. I am not sure if it is right or wrong, but I have a feeling that when you are impulsive, you will be very strong, but after that, you will become weak. You are weaker now than you were at noon. If you go on like this, it will hurt others and yourself. You do not know what will happen to you." As John listened, he couldn't help but stand up and kneel down. He nodded and said, "You're right. Even I can't describe it so clearly. Sometimes I always feel that everything around me is against me, but I can't break through the shackles with my own strength. Only when I give up my rationality will I feel more relaxed. The effect of your hammer today was so obvious. You must have a way to solve it, please." Ammon reached out and helped him up. He pressed him back to the chair and said, "I may not be able to help you. I cannot stay by your side and hammer you every time you are angry, but I can try a method. It also comes from the skills of the miners in Duk. If you want to learn it, you must keep it a secret. I do not need to explain the reason." John nodded and said, "Of course I will listen to you. I cannot express my gratitude." Ammon pointed to the sky outside the window and said, "Your agitation is affected by the environment, so I suggest you face it well. Looking up at the stars may give you peace of mind. You must have a firm belief, whether it comes from faith or not. You must see clearly what your heart is pursuing and find a clear state of mind. Only then will you know what you have to overcome." John was puzzled. "Look at the stars?" Ammon smiled and shook his head. It is to close your eyes and look at the stars in your heart. Release the feelings of your soul, and then slowly withdraw it. It is like a devout prayer to the gods. Let the power naturally accompany your heart, instead of being controlled by it. Only in this way can you truly be at peace. It may or may not work, but I suggest you give it a try. Amon taught John a method of prayer in detail. It was very close to meditation, but it was difficult to say it was a kind of magic. It took a long time for the warrior to fully understand what to do. Amon himself was not sure. If John succeeded, it would confirm his speculation. What would happen if the restlessness of desire led astray, and the mind was controlled by the power? Just look at John. In the future, when teaching the power of two sides, Amon should be careful to avoid a situation like John's. But he did not tell John that this was actually a method of meditation to practice the power of two sides, and he would not tell him that he was a sorcerer. Even if someone knew what he taught John, it would be the profound content of the skills of the miners in Duk. It did not involve any specific magic, so no one could find anything wrong with it. John thanked him profusely, and left when the sky was just beginning to brighten. Amon also breathed a sigh of relief. At least he knew that Moses and the others would not be mistreated too much in Mount Horeb. Although they still had to work for the pharaohs of Igut, it was good to know their whereabouts. As for how to get them out, Amon had no idea. It was better to ask Moses and the others about their experiences first. The next day, Amon had Moses brought to his room for a private interrogation. Moses used to be the young master of Mayor Dusty. He was fair and chubby, but now he had become dark and thin. It was sad to see him like this. Moses bowed to Amon as soon as he entered the room. "Thank you for saving me yesterday, my lord. Are you really a Duk miner?" Amon pulled him up. "Moses, don't you recognize me? The last time we met was 3 years ago. I am Amon. Have you forgotten?" Moses stared at Amon for a long time. Suddenly he burst into tears and hugged Amon. "Yes, you are Amon, the drunkard's son. Amon, your appearance has changed completely. I can't recognize you. Yesterday, I heard your name from them, but I couldn't believe it. But your skill in opening ores is real, Amon. Duk is gone. Everyone is gone. How did you appear here, and become an emissary of the temple of Isis?" Amon wiped away Moses' tears and asked, "Don't you know that I was banished from Duk before the flood?" "Really?" Moses was surprised. When Amon was sent to the mountains by Mayor Dusty to hunt down the evil sorcerer bear, Moses was not in Duk. He was sent to Saya by his father to study hieroglyphs and various classics. He did not know what happened in Duk. Later, a great flood engulfed his hometown, so no one told him about it. Amon sighed. "I mind a god's tear, but it was taken away by Lord Roddick's entourage on the spot. I will be severely punished by the kingdom. Your father found an excuse to drive me out of Duk. It was an exile, but also a kind of protection. My story is too long to tell. First, tell me how you came to Mount Horeb." Moses' eyes became wet again. After sitting down, he told the story of the sufferings of the survivors in Duk. Dusty raised Moses as his heir. In the whole town, he was the only one who had the right to send his son to Saya. Although Dusty was only a mayor, his status was not low. He was also rich enough to buy a manor in Saya for Moses to live in. He liked his son very much, but he was not too arrogant. He was also very strict with his son. Moses was 2 years older than Amon. He was 19 this year. When he turned 16, Dusty brought him to the shrine of Murin to receive the blessing, and began to learn the mining skills of Duk. Although Moses did not need to mine the parangons himself, as the future manager of Duk, he had to master the skills passed down from generation to generation. As the chief priest of Duk, Dusty was also the host of the blessing ceremony. This ceremony would also be passed on to Moses in the future. Dusty's manor in Saya was not only the residence of Moses, but also the place where the Dushans stayed when they came to and from the city. There was a law in the kingdom that the registered miners of Duk were not allowed to leave without permission. But just before the flood, Dusty sent people to the city to deliver the taxes, and buy the daily necessities needed in the town. The dozens of people sent were all young and strong miners. After finishing their official duties, these people stayed in Dusty's manor, and casually brought some things for young Master Moses. Before they could set off for Duk, It began to rain heavily in the charcoal forest. The post road was cut off, and they were stranded in the city. They became the other group of survivors apart from Ammon. Moses's slaves were also from Duk. There were more than 60 of them in total. The supreme mage Goliath commanded the army and the people and finally saved Saya in the flood. After the flood, the town of Duk no longer existed. Of course, Moses and the others could not go back. Not long after, there was a rumor that the people of Duk had violated the oracle of the guardian god, and were punished by the god, bringing about the flood. They were the people who were hated by the god, and would bring disaster. Enlil the Great punished the town of Duk by washing the earth with a flood to bless the people. This rumor was terrible. The people of Saya, who had just experienced a disaster, were full of hostility towards the Dushians. There were even several incidents of siege and attack on the manor. The Dushians were strong and not to be trifled with. They took up weapons to defend the manor. In the end, a bloody conflict broke out. Some troublemakers were killed in the fight. The miners acted in self-defense. From the point of view of the law of the city, Lord Shao-Emo had no reason to punish them. However, the angry people could not forgive the miners for killing people. Almost every day, people gathered outside the manor and shouted, "Kill them, in the name of the god." There were always people who tried to rush into the manor and attack Moses and the others. The friction was endless. Even the guards of the city could not suppress it. Moses and the other Dushians had become the target of public criticism. Even the shops in the city were not willing to sell to them. When the food stored in the manor ran out, they could barely survive. At that time, Goliath was not in the city of Saya. The supreme mage had returned to the king's capital, and closed his door to concentrate on his training. But Goliath seemed to have expected this situation before he left. He specially ordered his disciple, the acting high priest Walter, to take care of Moses and the others. When things got out of hand, Walter entered the manor with the guards of the shrine, and found Moses. At that time, it was impossible for Moses and the others to stay in Saya. Walter asked him where he wanted to go. Chapter 102. You must not pray to other gods. Walter was very busy at that time, and did not arrange this matter immediately. He only ordered the guards to protect the manor, and sent Moses and the others enough food and water, asking them to wait for a while. Later, when Goliath returned to Saya, he tried to persuade Moses to stay, but the frightened Moses refused to stay any longer, and begged the supreme mage to send them away safely. Goliath had no choice but to order his disciple Walter to personally escort Moses and the others out of the border, and protect them from harm. Before leaving, he asked Moses, "If one day you can return to your homeland, will you still be willing to come back?" Moses replied without thinking, "Is it Duk? Of course it is my homeland." In his mind, the almost isolated Duk and the repulsive Saya were two completely different worlds. During the days when he was besieged and attacked, his greatest wish was to return to his homeland and rebuild it. This had become Moses's life dream. At that time, Goliath said something that Moses did not quite understand. "You will become the legal heirs of a very important land. No matter where you go, you may face difficult experiences. Your homeland will surface, but it will be a few years later. If you can really come back by then, don't forget what I did today." Moses knelt on the ground and said, "Dear Supreme Mage, my people and I will always be grateful to you. If you have any requests in the future, Moses will do his best to fulfill them." Walter escorted Moses and the others through the half-dried swamp, across the desert, all the way to the border of Saya. Moses came to the Cape States and sought refuge from Lord Roddick. He did not ask for much. He only wanted to buy a field and live there temporarily. The miners were all strong young men, who could support themselves and wait for an opportunity to return to their homeland in the future. Roddick had received a lot of benefits from Mayor Dusty, so it should not be a problem for the orphan of an old friend to ask for his help. He agreed to Moses' request, and even divided a field in his territory for them to live in. But not long after, another accident happened. Moses and the others came to the Cape States to seek refuge. Not long after they left the Cape States, the news could not be hidden, and soon reached the capital of Igut. The supreme mage Julian, who was in Cape, wrote secret reports to the Academy of Igut and the pharaohs of Igut. Roddik soon received an order from Pharaoh to send guards to send the Dushians to the designated place. Julian knew that Amon was a Duk miner. As the high priest of the Temple of Isis, he should have read the land of Marduk and know a lot about it. Perhaps it was out of revenge against Amon, or perhaps he wanted to take credit from Pharaoh. In short, the secret report did not contain anything good. Of course, Moses did not know the details. Thus, Moses was sent to Mount Horeb. He and the Dushians were imprisoned there, and became Pharaoh's slaves. It was said that they were treated as foreign prisoners of war, and were still working as parangons. They were escorted here by Julian herself. Julian not only conveyed Pharaoh's order, but also said that the Dushians were disliked and banished by the gods. They were punished by the gods for losing their homes. This was the general experience of Moses and the others. Amon fell into deep thought after listening to the report. The suffering of his people was probably not as simple as Julian's revenge against his people. Even Roddik could not protect these people. There must be other reasons why Pharaoh ordered them to be imprisoned here. Maria once said to Amon, "I should thank you. I should also help you. But I don't know how much I can help you." It was clear that she knew about this matter, but she was powerless to help Awang and the others. Thanks to Murin's hint, Amon already knew that the area around Duk would become a fertile land for thousands of miles. Thanks to Schrodinger's hint and the legend of the land of Marduk, he knew that the land would be contested for. He had also seen Mayor Dusty's soul in the underworld. He knew that the title deed of the land around Duk was in Moses's hands. Pharaoh detained the Dushians on the one hand, because their skills were very useful, and Mount Horeb was the best place to mine parangons. More importantly, did Amon also want to lay his hands on the fertile land in the future? Did the Academy of Igut also know about the changes that were going to take place in Duk? This kind of thing was hard to say. Since Murin knew about it, then the gods of Egypt might also know about it. Perhaps they had informed their people. Amon was silent for a long time. Then he whispered, "Moses, I heard that you have all the title deeds in Duk. Is that true?" Moses suddenly became alert. "Who told you that?" Amon sighed and put his hand on Amon's shoulder. "Don't doubt me. I'm not here to test you. After I left Duk, Mayor Dusty told me about it himself." Tears welled up in Moses's eyes again. "I don't have the title deeds with me. They're all hidden in a secret place in Saya. My father sent me to Saya, but he died in the flood. What else did he say to you before he left?" "Mayor Dusty hopes that you and the survivors of Duk can return to your hometown and rebuild it. I also want to ask you, are you willing to do that?" Moses couldn't help but nod. He grabbed Amon's arm and said, "Yes, I am. This is what everyone and I dream about. Amon, you are now the special inspector of the Temple of Isis. Do you have a way to save us?" Amon shook his head helplessly. "I am just a guard captain in the archives of the Temple of Isis. There is no way I can make Pharaoh change his order and release you. This time I came to Mount Horeb. I can only do my best to make you receive better treatment in the future. But don't worry, after I left Duk, I heard an oracle. The emissary of God will guide you out of Igut and back to your hometown." Moses's grip tightened. "Will the emissary of God come to Mount Horeb? When?" Amon patted the back of his hand and said, "Since God has promised, please wait patiently for the oracle's guidance. The miners have pinned their hopes on you. You are their leader. What you need to do now is to lead your people to live a good life. Don't lose confidence and courage." I didn't tell Moses too much because he didn't want to bring trouble to himself and his people. Some things couldn't be made public, and it would be bad for Moses to know too much too early. His appearance was only to give his people hope. After asking Moses to stay for a sumptuous lunch with him, he ordered someone to send him back. Amon stayed in Mount Horeb for another 10 days, ostensibly to recover from his injuries. Puera and John kept their promise. The miners' living conditions in Duk improved a lot. These people had mined at least 40% of the parangons in Duk, so they should be treated better. Just as Hardadef had promised. As long as I didn't bring these tribesmen away, everything else wouldn't matter. In a remote place like Mount Horeb, Puera and Hardadef had the final say in everything. Amon took the opportunity to make a request. He wanted to move to a place near the miner's residence, so that he could talk to his people at any time. He was very concerned about the situation in his hometown. The shabby stone houses in the village were naturally not suitable for the envoy to live in. The closest houses were the residences of the mages who mined parangons. Poira ordered the mages to leave the courtyard for Ah to live in for the time being. In fact, Amon didn't need to talk to the miners. After the flood, Duk no longer existed. There was nothing to talk about. Amon had other plans. He was well aware of the situation in Mount Horeb. Although there were many warriors and mages taking turns to guard the place, the security was not tight. This place was deep in the hinterland of Igut. In peacetime, there was no threat of war. No one would be nervous all the time. On the other hand, Mount Horeb was a very remote and semi-desert area. It was more than 200 miles away from the Nile River. There were no villages or residents nearby. No one would come here to cause trouble. It was not easy for the people here to escape. Mining was very tiring, so there was really no need to be too strict with management. The guards of Mount Horeb were not weak, but in terms of individual ability, none of them could compare to Ah. The one with the highest level of magic was Poira, and the one with the highest level of body arts was Hardadef. Even if the two of them combined, they still could not compare to Ah. Amon always had a way to hide what he wanted to do, as long as he didn't make it too obvious. It was late at night. Moses tossed and turned in bed, unable to fall asleep. He was still thinking about the scene when he met Amon. Amon's appearance brought a glimmer of hope to his people. The treatment they received these days had improved a lot. But was what he said true? Was there really a God to guide them out of this predicament? Moses had been suffering from insomnia for 3 days. Amon's arrival brought new anxiety and expectation. At this moment he suddenly heard a voice in his ear. "Moses, please don't be afraid. Don't be surprised. The voice you heard is the guidance of God." Moses was so scared that he almost fell off the bed. He looked around for a long time. There was no one in the room. He sat up excitedly. When he was about to speak, he heard the voice again. "Don't speak. You can't have sex with me in this way yet. Please follow my instructions. Put on your clothes and walk out. Follow a group of glowing lights to Mount Horeb. I will wait for you there." Moses felt his heart beating so hard that it almost jumped out of his throat. Amon said that there would be a God to guide him. Did he really appear so soon? He couldn't believe it, but he couldn't give up this opportunity. He put on his clothes, gritted his teeth, and walked out of the stone house. There was a faint glow outside, like a lone firefly flying in the night. As soon as Moses left the house, the glow flew away. The night was very quiet, so quiet that it was scary. Even the light footsteps seemed to have echoes, as if there was an invisible person following behind. Moses was very nervous, afraid of being discovered by the guards. But the glow led him around the stone houses. Coincidentally, he didn't meet anyone. Finally, he left the village and walked towards Mount Horeb. When he reached the foot of the mountain, he looked back. There were a few guards leaning against the wall outside the village, dozing off. They didn't seem to notice him. Only then did he turn around and go up the mountain. The mountain was a little steep. Sparse shrubs grew between the bare rocks. The glow was sometimes fast, sometimes slow. It was guiding Moses to the top of the mountain through the easiest path. Tonight Moses was very excited. He felt that there was an invisible force supporting him. His footsteps were light, and he walked very fast. The moon was bright. A man stood on the top of the mountain, leaning on a tree branch. He was wearing a cloak, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. The glow flew to the top of the mountain and disappeared into his arms. He spoke to Moses. The man was standing in front of him, but his voice was very faint, as if it came from far away. "Moses, child of Duk, please don't be afraid. I am the messenger who will guide you." Moses felt like he was sleepwalking. He couldn't believe that he had just walked out of the stone house. He followed the glow to the top of the mountain. Sure enough, he saw the man who spoke. He stepped forward and knelt down. "Are you really here to guide me and my people out of trouble?" The man nodded. "Yes. Since I have guided you to this place to see me, I will guide you and your people back to your homeland in the future. You must not have any doubts in your heart." Moses knelt on the ground for a long time without saying a word. His shoulders trembled, and he began to cry silently. Ah, who was wearing a cloak and had changed his voice, asked softly, "What's wrong with you? Why are you crying when you see me?" Moses sobbed. "I am crying for the suffering of my fate, for my father, for Duk. I finally see you. May I ask, from which god did you guide me?" Ah replied, "I made a promise to Murin that I will guide you and your people back to your homeland and rebuild it." Moses' shoulders trembled even more. "I dare not lie in front of the gods, but I do have doubts in my heart. When my father died in the flood, where was the guardian? Where was the guardian god when I and my clansmen were in danger? I don't hate the guardian, but I can't summon the reverence I once had in my heart. The world has become so strange to me, and the guardian is now like a stranger to me." Although he was only 19 years old, he had experienced so many hardships. Anyone would have matured, and could not help but think about the bigger picture. He had his own opinions about Murin. Although he didn't hate the goddess, he really couldn't respect her. Ah told him not to have any doubts in his heart, so he spoke his truest thoughts that had been suppressed for a long time. Ah didn't have enough time to explain anything to him, and this was something he couldn't explain clearly. But he had to give Moses a firm hope, so he said, "It's rare that you don't hate the guardian. When people pray to the gods, the first thing they have to do is to think about what they have done. Why do you ask the gods to do something for you? The former guardian did want to guide the people back, but she is not the only god in the world." Moses raised his tear-stained face. "I hope you can give me the only, the firmest faith. This is the reason for us to live well in the suffering. Since you have come here, will you guide me from beginning to end? May I know your name?" Ah replied, "My name is Allah. When you have doubts in your heart, you can silently recite this name. My appearance is like the light that guides you to the top of the mountain. The road is under your own feet. As long as you don't give up your faith, then I will not give up on you. Whether you have the protection of the guardian or not, no matter how many difficulties and dangers there are, I will fulfill my promise." Moses bent down and kissed the soil. "Your voice is the guidance of the gods, the light in the darkness. Since you can guide me out of the cage to this top of the mountain, can you also guide the people to leave here?" I wanted to sigh, but he held back and replied in a calm tone, "I can guide you to come here quietly in the dark, but if you walk out of here, you will be in a desert. It will be thousands of miles to go back to your hometown. You will have to pass through many cities in Igut. It is impossible for you and your people to escape without being discovered." Moses asked disappointedly, "Then how can we leave?" "Ah, don't give up your faith. From now on, you must prepare for the arrival of that day." "How should I prepare?" Moses asked. Ah raised the branch in his hand. "This is the reason why I summoned you here today. The skills of Duke's miners contain a mysterious and profound skill. It is the power of two sides. I want to awaken this power for you, and also awaken your faith, so that your heart can truly be strong." Ah changed his identity and taught Moses the power of two sides, but he said that it was the skills of Duke's miners, and made Moses swear to keep it a secret. On one hand, this was to make Moses believe it, and on the other hand, it was to avoid exposing his identity. As for whether Moses could master it, it depended on his luck. Ah could not force him. For the next few days, Ah guided Moses to quietly climb up Mount Horeb every night, holding the iron branch staff in his hand, and performed the awakening ritual for him. The result did not disappoint Ah. Just before he left Mount Horeb, Moses awakened the power of two sides. Ah made him make a very important vow. "You must not pray to other gods. You must be firm in your faith. I have taught you this power, but you cannot learn body arts or magic arts like others in the world. You must accept my guidance." What Ah taught Amon involved the secrets of the gods. According to Crazy Ole's guess, the gods did not want it to be spread. Ah had been to the realm of Kela, the queen of the underworld, where he could hear the prayers of the believers. Therefore, Ah did not allow Moses to pray to other gods. If he exposed the secrets that the gods did not want to see in the world, it would not be good for him or Moses. Chapter 103. Your things are lost. A few nights before leaving Mount Horeb, Ah taught Moses about his future training, and the various tests he would face. These were Bear's words and Ah's own experience. After all, Bear was different from Ah. He first became a 9th-level mage, and then started to practice the power of two sides. Even though he was a supreme mage, he was still a 6th-level warrior. Ah, on the other hand, started from this path under Crazy Ol's deliberate training. Crazy Ol laid the foundation for awakening the two sides in the name of teaching him the skills of a miner. Bear's exploration perfected this path. Now, when Ah taught Moses, the methods of practicing from the 1st to the 6th level were very clear. Ah did not teach Moses any specific martial arts or magic. He only wanted him to practice pure power and grow with his soul. On the one hand, time was too tight. On the other hand, it was not convenient for Moses to practice the specific skills in his current situation. These were all secrets. Before leaving, Ah said one last thing. If you want to get out of this predicament, you must first become stronger. The journey back to your hometown will be full of hardships and trials. You must be prepared now. Everything I teach you comes from the mining skills of Duk. You can also choose trustworthy people from your tribe to continue teaching, and make the same vow. The seed had been sown. It was time to see how it would sprout. Ah finally left Mount Horeb, and returned to the Temple of Isis with the parangons. He had successfully completed the inspection mission. The biggest gain from this trip was the whereabouts of the survivors of Duk. Maria did not tell him directly. Instead, she used this method to tell him. After returning to the Temple of Isis, Maria summoned him again. It was still in the study. The servants left, leaving only the two of them. They did not talk much about the inspection mission. Ah knelt down and saluted. Thank you for your guidance. I found the survivors of Duk. I owe a debt to the former mayor. His son Moses is the leader of the survivors. They look forward to returning to their hometown day and night. Maria looked at him apologetically. She waved at him. Sit down and talk. I know what you want to ask. I'm really sorry, but I can't order the release of those people. They are already Pharaoh's slaves. Unless I have a reason to ask Pharaoh's permission, I can't. Ah sat down and asked. Is it related to the military books you asked me to read? Maria nodded. If you think only for yourself, you can become a supreme warrior and be loyal to the Egyptian empire. You can obtain a noble status and have a good life. In fact, no matter where you want to go, it is the same. But you have your own ideals, and it is so difficult to realize them. The continent is likely to have conflicts in the near future. If you want to ask the pharaoh to release your people, you will have to make an indelible contribution to the empire, so the pharaoh has no choice but to agree. Ah nodded sincerely. Thank you, I understand. Maria tactfully pointed out a way for Audia to save his people. She reminded Audia that a dispute was about to break out on the road. As a warrior, the so-called indelible meritorious service was of course meritorious service. If Ah could lead his corps to make great contributions to the empire on the battlefield, he could ask Pharaoh to release the Dushians when he asked for a reward. This was something that could not be refused. It was too difficult to do this. Although Maria was willing to help, Audia had to rely on himself. Becoming a supreme warrior was just the beginning. Then there was silence again between the two, looking at each other. This time, the purpose of the summons was to arrange a long journey. Maria had a lot to say to Audia, but she felt that there was no need to say it. Audia had a lot of gratitude in his heart, but he felt that there was no need to say it. Since Maria didn't speak, he would rather look at her and feel her breath. Unfortunately, he couldn't sit here and look at her forever. In the end, it was Maria who broke the silence. Audia, no matter how difficult what you are going to do, I have a wish. I hope you cherish yourself. If you have done your best, don't embarrass yourself anymore. As long as you are still the pure Audia, you can come back anytime. Isis will protect you. She put something on the table and said, this time, I was going to send a mage. This Taraculus is not only the reward of the mission, but also an artifact to record all kinds of information. Later, I changed my mind. In the desert and swamps where monsters run rampant, it is safer to send a warrior who is familiar with the situation, so I decided to send you. This Taraculus is still the reward of the mission. You are not a mage, but you can use other ways to record information. This is a secret mission, so you can't use your public identity. Someone will give you a blank certificate and customs clearance document. You only need to write your name on it. You can also hire bodyguards to accompany you. There are only a few days left before you set off. Go back and prepare well. Don't worry about everything. I will wait for the news of your return. As for this Taraculus, I hope you can treasure it. The holy maiden was generous with her reward on behalf of the Temple of Isis. She gave him a Taraculus for this mission, and the last sentence she said was meaningful. It would make sense if a mage was sent, because the Taraculus could be used as a medium to record information. But if Ajia wanted to reward him in such a way, there must be a deeper meaning. Ajia already had a Taraculus, and Crazy Ol had recorded all kinds of information in it. Maria might do the same. Ajia was only a warrior. Even if there was any magic information in it, Maria knew that he would not be able to see it. But it would be wrong to think so. Ajia was also a 6th-level sorcerer, especially skilled in spatial magic and message magic. Ajia felt that this Taraculus had recorded some kind of information, but he did not dare to read it in the Temple of Isis, lest he accidentally expose his secret when he used magic. He could only put this precious parangan away first. There were still a few days before the departure. He needed to do some work in the archives, and he had to use these last few days to read some books. He planned to keep the military books with him and show them to Madanzo on the way. If he really wanted to become a general on the battlefield in the future, he would not be able to rely on his own strength. He needed the help of subordinates who could fight well. Madanzo was a good candidate. At the same time, he borrowed many books on the art of war, logistics, marching and battle formations. Since he had a spatial artifact, he might as well read them on the way. On the last day of his duty in the archives, I found an opportunity to open the volume of the Land of Marduk and read it carefully from beginning to end. Last time, he read it secretly when no one was around. He could not read it too carefully because of the limited time. Today, he tried to remember every detail between the lines. At the end of the blank space, he saw the 2 familiar marks again. He secretly took out the token given by Crazy Ol and compared it. It was the mark left by Bear, but it seemed to have been printed in a hurry. It was very vague and hard to read. The sound of the guards talking and saluting came from outside. I hurriedly put away the book and the cabinet back to its original state. Just as he was about to go out, he suddenly heard someone say behind him, "Captain, you dropped something." I was scared witless. Even though he was usually calm and collected, at this moment, he almost knocked over the cabinet beside him. This was the library where the precious files were kept. No one was allowed to enter without permission. Moreover, with his vigilance, he did not notice that there was someone in the room. He turned around in shock and pulled out the dagger he always carried with him. In the narrow aisle between the 2 rows of bookshelves, he took a fighting stance that could be used to attack or defend. But the next moment, I immediately put down his weapon and knelt on one knee. "Dear High Priest, why did you suddenly come in without even greeting me? Please forgive me for not greeting you with courtesy." The person in front of him was wearing a robe and had a smile on his face. He looked at Ah with a meaningful look in his eyes. He did not hold a staff in his hand, but a token in his hand. "Captain Ah, you are very vigilant and responsive. I can see that you are loyal to your duty. I am very satisfied. Is this token yours?" "No, it fell to the ground." "Take it back." The person who spoke was familiar with Ah. It was George, the high priest who used to be in charge of the archives. Not long ago, he was promoted to high priest by the Holy Lady, filling the position left vacant by Julian's transfer. George was easygoing and did not care much about the affairs of the archives. He used to be in charge of the archives, which was an easy but not profitable job. He came from a civilian background and did not have any outstanding background. Later, he became a supreme mage and obtained the position of honorary high priest of the Temple of Isis, but he only held the position of a high priest. As an honorary high priest, George did not like to fight for power. He lived a secluded life in the Temple of Isis. Not long before Amon arrived at the shrine, he had quietly advanced to the 8th level of a mage. In addition to the original 3 high priests in the Temple of Isis, there were 5 honorary high priests, all of whom were supreme mages. Although they did not have any real power, their status was transcendent. George was the most inconspicuous one among them. Unexpectedly, when the new official high priest was elected, the Holy Lady promoted George and reported that Pharaoh was approved. This happened after I arrived at the shrine. After George became the high priest, the chief priest of the archives was naturally replaced by someone else, but it was still under the direct control of George. He was responsible for all the archives of the Temple of Isis, the list of farms and servants, and the collection and registration of quarterly taxes. His authority was much greater than before, but his character did not change much. He was still smiling all day long. George was now looking at Ah with a smile. Of course, the token given by Crazy Ol was gone. He broke out in a cold sweat. It was impossible for Ah to be so careless. He must have put the token in his pocket, but it somehow fell into the hands of this supreme mage. Idu must have used stealth magic to sneak into the document room without Ah noticing. He saw Ah taking out the token, and maybe he also saw Ah flipping through the books and hieroglyphs. Then he used some unknown method to take the token from Ah's arms. However, the high priest pretended to be confused and deliberately said that the sign had fallen on the ground. Amir was quite nervous. After so long, he finally made a mistake. In the face of a supreme mage that he could not compete with, all his secrets were in danger of being exposed. He quickly thought about how to explain, but when he heard George's words, he immediately replied, "It's mine. Thank you, Lord George. I accidentally dropped it on the ground just now." George returned the token to Ah and said, "It's a very special emblem. It seems to be a precious souvenir. You must keep it well. Don't throw it away like this." "Who gave it to you? The material and the pattern are very special. I don't think ordinary people can make it." The supreme mage's smiling eyes seemed to penetrate Ah's soul. I could only reply calmly, "An elder in my hometown left it to me as a souvenir. He is no longer here." George stopped smiling. "Oh, he's no longer in this world? What a pity." I told the truth. "Haven't you heard of it? My hometown was destroyed by a great flood, and that elder died in that disaster." George sighed. "I'm sorry to bring up your sad past. I almost forgot that your hometown is Duk. It was you who mined the god's tear and returned Nero's relics. Young man, your actions are indeed admirable. I heard that there are many scrolls among Nero's relics. I would like to ask, is there a scroll called Tiamat's Wrath?" I thought for a moment and replied, "Lord Nero's will was very generous. I received 6 supreme scrolls and 6 intermediate scrolls, but there is no Tiamat's Wrath. I have never even heard of this name." George said again, "I'm just asking. It is a legendary scroll. Many people have never heard of it. It is said that only Nero has the ability and interest to make it, but the effort and the price he has to pay is also great. I don't know if he has tried it or if it was successful. But since you are here, you can do me a favor." I hurriedly said, "Dear High Priest, please tell me what you need." George said in a self-deprecating tone, "I am old and my memory is often bad. I came to look for a scroll, but I came to the wrong room. I will tell you the serial number. Bring it directly to me. I remember that the scroll is locked in a cabinet. Ask the priest in charge for the key. Tell him that I want to see it." After he finished speaking, the supreme mage gave him a file number, turned around and walked out, leaving Amon standing alone with the sign in his hand. The fine sweat on Ah's body gradually dried. He couldn't help but feel a little cold. He shook his head hard and ran out to fetch the scroll for High Priest George. Ah took the special key that was enchanted with magic and opened the file cabinet guarded by the magic circle. When he took out the scroll, he was shocked. The scroll was very thin. The content was about the making and introduction of scrolls. The cover was written Tiamat's Wrath. This was the scroll that Idu was asking about. Ah couldn't help but open it and take a look. He couldn't help but hold his breath. He finally understood how precious the gray scroll he had been keeping for so long was. The scroll introduced the theoretical method of making this scroll. It was an unimaginable and almost impossible task, but Nero had done it. Tiamat's Wrath was different from any other scroll. To activate it, the user's life was the price. Its power could not be controlled at all. Once it was activated, not only would it burn the user's life, but it would also destroy all life within its range. It was said that even the gods would be severely injured. If Ah was willing to sacrifice his own life, with Tiamat's wrath, he could die with almost anyone. He finally understood why the guardian of the underworld had panicked and retreated when he took out the gray scroll. Nero might have brought Tiamat's wrath with him because he wanted to die with Bear. But in the end, there was no need to use the scroll, because Bear had also chosen to die with him. Ah finished reading the thin scroll in a few seconds. Ah put it in a beautiful wooden box, held it with both hands, and personally brought it to a side hall where Ida usually handled his official business. George smiled and nodded when he saw Ah. You came quickly. I just sat down and you've already brought the scroll. Thank you for your hard work. Place it on the table. Ah placed the wooden box on the table and respectfully stepped to the side. He stood there with his hands by his side, but he did not immediately leave. George did not open the wooden box to look at the scroll either. Instead, he lowered his head and continued to handle official business. After a while, he pretended to be surprised and looked up. Ah, you haven't left yet. Is there something you need? Ah nodded. Yes, my lord. You have not checked the scroll yet. I am also waiting for your instructions. George ordered all the servants in the room to leave. Then he said to Ah. Of course I trust Captain Ah. There is no need to check the scroll. There is no one else here now. Just say what you have to say. Amon took out 2 supreme scrolls from his bosom and gently placed them on the table. These are gifts from Lord Nero. In order to express my respect for you, my dear supreme mage, please accept them. Amon took out 2 supreme scrolls from his bosom and gently placed them on the table. I did not expect Ah to give him a gift. George was stunned. He twirled his beard and laughed out loud. Ah, do you know how valuable this gift is? Ah replied. No matter how precious an item is, it must have its corresponding use. The value of this item cannot be measured by money alone. In front of you, my lord, they are just tools to perform magic. George looked at Ah with great interest and said, I have experienced enough things and understand people's hearts. If I don't accept it, I am afraid you will not be able to rest easy. Well, thank you. He accepted the 2 supreme scrolls calmly. Chapter 104. George must have seen Amon reading the books in secret, but he pretended not to know and took away the sign, which scared Amon and secretly warned him. Amon was also wondering why he did that. Perhaps it was to give face to the adoratress. Although their positions were different, their situations were the same. They were both promoted by the adoratress and were on the same side in the Isis shrine. There was also another possibility. Idu knew that Amon had a batch of precious scrolls, so he seized the opportunity to extort him. Amon gave 2 scrolls to George as a test. However, judging from George's tone, he had no intention of pursuing the matter. Amon was thinking about all kinds of possibilities. When he was about to leave, he suddenly heard George murmuring to himself while looking at the ceiling. George is just a name I gave myself after I entered the temple and made a vow in front of the goddess Isis. I used to be called Searchalade. I don't want to mention it, and I hope no one will mention it again. Amon was stunned and did not know what to say. He had heard of the name Searchalade in Crazy Ole's message. Searchalade was a friend Nietzsche met when he traveled to the Empire of Igut. He was also a sorcerer. At that time, he lived in the suburbs of Herak. When he met Nietzsche, he was only a 5th-level sorcerer. As a supreme sorcerer, Nietzsche gave Searchalade many pointers. Searchalade swore to repay Nietzsche. That was why Nietzsche mentioned his name in his message. Searchalade came to the Temple of Isis 20 years ago and changed his name to George. That was more than 10 years after Bear's death. At that time, he had already become a supreme mage. Crazy Ole did not know about this, so the Taraculus did not mention it. When a sorcerer became a supreme sorcerer, his situation would change subtly. As long as he was loyal to the temple, he would get another identity. When Searchalade came to the Temple of Isis, he became an honorary high priest. He even changed his name. His past experiences had long disappeared in all kinds of records. There was only the supreme mage George in the world. 20 years later, by coincidence, he not only became a high priest, but also saw Crazy Old's token. George hinted to Amon that he knew the origin of the token. At the same time, he warned Amon not to mention it again. This was a tacit secret between them. It had been more than 40 years since Crazy Old and Searchelade met. 20 years had passed since Searchelade came to the Temple of Isis and became the Supreme Mage George. The past had long become a dust-covered secret. Amon stood there in silence. George turned his head to look at him and said with a faint smile, "You have become an honorary warrior of the Temple of Isis. It is very likely that you will become a supreme warrior in the future. This is enough to change your life. But in the Temple of Isis, you must obey everything here. You must not offend or blaspheme the gods." Maybe I am overthinking. Your behavior at the blessing ceremony that day is enough to prove your loyalty. Amon hurriedly nodded and said, "Honorable High Priest, I will remember your words." George said kindly, "It's good that you remember. I didn't expect you to be a warrior. If you have any questions in the future, you can come to me. I will be happy to help you as long as it does not violate the rules of the temple. I don't want to read this book anymore. I don't want to mention many things in the past. You can take it back." Amon took the order and left. George did not even open the box. The book was sent back. George did this as a way of repaying Crazy Old's kindness. The Supreme Mage was not a man who would break his promise. But the situation was different now. He warned Amon not to mention the past again, nor to take out the token easily. Amon was scared. In a place like the Temple of Isis, as long as there was a flaw, it would be discovered sooner or later. Fortunately, he met George this time. It was scary but not dangerous. It was all thanks to Crazy Old's kindness. Being discovered seemed inevitable, but meeting George was an accident. In fact, Crazy Old's message also mentioned the original high priest, Julian. But in front of Julian, Amon would never dare to take out the token. It would only make him die faster. He must be careful in the future. He could not just believe in luck. Before he became a supreme warrior and was allowed to read the hieroglyphs, Amon would not read anything he was not supposed to read. Intentionally or unintentionally, George pointed out one thing to Amon. The gray nameless scroll was the legendary Tiamat's Wrath. It was probably the only Tiamat's Wrath in the world. After handing over the archives, Amon left the temple and went to Sayo's house. He made a request to Sayo that he had long wanted to make, to buy the slave Aesop. Of course, Sayo was reluctant to sell such a capable slave, but he could not refuse Amon's request. Moreover, the price Amon offered was too astonishing. He put 10 parangons on the table. This was by no means the price of a slave. When Amon rescued Sayo in the desert and escorted Sayo safely to the Cape States, he was also paid 10 parangons. Now he had returned the money in the name of buying Aesop. Sayo was shocked. Of course, he did not dare to accept the money. He agreed to give Aesop to Amon on the spot. Amon smiled and insisted that Sayo accept the parangons. After a long time, Sayo had to accept the parangons. Sweat broke out on his forehead. He quickly ordered someone to call Aesop and said, "Mr. Amon has bought you. In the future, you must listen to Mr. Amon and serve him." Before leaving, Amon left Sayo a scroll and specifically told him, "Read this scroll carefully. If there is anything you don't understand, you can pay someone to explain it to you. Don't you want to be a noble? There may be a chance in the future. The things in this book will be very important." I borrowed this from the archives of Isis. You must take good care of it. I'm going on a long trip. Return it to me when I come back. The content of the book mainly talked about transportation. Sahather was a businessman who did cross-border trade, so he was naturally an expert in organizing caravans. However, the book also talked about the organization, scheduling, and supply of military logistics, as well as the transportation of military formations. Sayo did not understand why Amon wanted him to read this, but since he had instructed him to, he would keep it and read it slowly. The book was the collection of the Temple of Isis. In Sayo's mind, it added a mysterious and noble atmosphere. He had to put it away. When Amon walked out with the newly bought slave, Aesop asked, "Master Amon, why did you buy me? You bought me for the same amount of money that Master Sahather paid you to thank you for saving his life." Why is that? Amon smiled and said, Aesop, you are not lower than your master, including me. Although you are my slave, I can't restrict your freedom to look up at the stars. You have two choices. One is to continue to work for Master Sio and receive your salary. But you are only my slave in name. Two is that I have a friend who has a manor in Montefiore. He is not here all year round and needs a steward to take care of it. Are you willing to help me? Aesop bowed and said, Master Amon, you really don't have to talk to me like this. I should listen to your orders. Why would I not help you? It's just that 10 parangons to buy a slave is too expensive. There is no need to spend this money. Amon laughed and said, You got into the role very quickly. Well, in the future, if there is anything I need you to help me think about it. Come with me to the manor. I have a surprise for you. The surprise Amon was talking about was a blank document. As long as one wrote his name, he would have the identity of a free citizen of the Empire of Igut. Amon used to have another similar document, but he wrote Allah's name on it and used it. This time, in order to carry out the secret mission, the temple gave him the same document. Amon did not need it himself, so he gave it to Aesop. In the manor, Aesop held the document and knelt down for a long time without saying anything. When he raised his head, his face was full of tears. He choked and said, Master Amon, I don't know how to repay you. Why do you give me such a precious thing? Amon shook his head and said, It is of no use to me, but it can change your identity so that you will no longer be a slave. If you want to repay me, I know you are a very capable person, so I will leave this manor to you. When the master is not around, please take good care of it. I will also leave a sum of money for you to do business with. I don't know when I will be back. Aesop said, Master, rest assured and go do your work. I will take care of everything here, so you don't need to worry. Amon asked again, Aesop, what name are you going to write on this? Aesop said, Of course it will still be Aesop. It is my name. Amon asked curiously, Why not change your name so that no one can recognize you? Aesop replied, This is the name my father gave me. I don't want to give it up. There are many people with the same name in the world. It doesn't matter if there is another free citizen named Aesop. Amon nodded. Then do as you wish, Mr. Aesop. Regardless of whether it was in the Igut or the countries on the continent, masters could sell slaves and treat them well. But they had no right to give slaves freedom without permission. This was a law. Even if Amon bought Aesop, he couldn't make him a freedman. What he did now was a way of replacing Aesop with someone else, giving Aesop a new identity. He was no longer the same person as before. This was a gift that Aesop couldn't even dream of. After handing the manor to Aesop, Amon also stored some of his personal belongings here. The hired servants also needed someone to manage them, and the fine wine and food that Schrödinger liked were prepared by someone every day. But after Amon and Madanzo left Montefiore, Schrödinger suddenly jumped out of the bushes beside the road and stopped in front of Amon, glaring at him. Amon squatted down and said softly, Schrödinger, I haven't seen you for a few days. I want to say hello, but I don't know where to find you. Now I'm going back to Duke to carry out my task. You can have fun in Montefiore. I've arranged everything. The cat twisted its neck, raised its paw, and pointed at Amon's waist without making a sound. In the past, Amon always carried a large leather bag on his back when he left Duke. Schrödinger always hid in the bag to sleep. This time, Schrödinger didn't take the bag out. It seemed that he was not satisfied. Amon tried to persuade him again. You asked me to take you back to Igut. You've come all the way here. You've been living a comfortable life in Montefiore. Why do you want to take risks with me? Why don't you just wait for me in the city? Schrödinger puffed his cheeks and didn't say anything. He didn't put down his paw either. Madanzo watched Amon talking to a cat in a soft voice. He couldn't help but feel a little strange. But he knew that the cat had a special relationship with Amon back in the barbarian tribe, so he didn't interrupt. Amon had no choice but to stand up. He waved the iron stick in his hand and took out a large leather bag out of thin air. Schrödinger jumped onto the bag and dug the opening with his paw. Then he got in skillfully. Amon turned to Madanzo and said, Go to the town ahead and buy more wine. Also prepare a new batch of meat floss. I'll teach you how to use magic to process vegetables and meat, so that they can be preserved for a long time and taste delicious. Madanzo smiled and asked, Ammonius, I've always seen you make a lot of things out of thin air. What kind of magic is that? Ammon replied indifferently, It's no big deal. It's just with the help of a spatial artifact. When you reach the 6th level, you'll be able to learn advanced spatial magic. I'll teach you how to use spatial artifacts. The more magic you have, the more space you can use magic. It's really convenient for many things. In the town ahead, they not only bought a lot of daily necessities, but also a carriage and 2 horses. 2 men and a cat drove the carriage at an unhurried pace for a month and finally arrived at the border of Igut. Along the way, Madanzo, in addition to reading the military books Ammon gave him, used magic to process all kinds of secret food. It seemed like a trivial matter, but it was a kind of training to control one's power. For example, to process a piece of fresh beef into jerky and retain its original flavor, one needed to use fire and water magic at the same time, and even simple spatial magic. The heat could not be wrong, otherwise the jerky would become tasteless freeze-dried or black charcoal. It might be fun to process a few pieces of meat, but it would be boring to do it for many days in a row. That was what Ammon wanted Madanzo to do, to use magic in a mundane way. When they arrived at the last town on the border of Igut, Ammon let Madanzo sell the carriage and the horses, and the 2 of them continued on foot. Puzzled, Madanzo asked, We still have a long way to go to the Lokia. Isn't it more convenient to take a carriage? Why do we have to walk? Ammon smiled mysteriously. You'll understand soon enough. Just walk like this. Don't be afraid of hardship. It's a necessary experience for you. In front of them was the Saya Desert. They were traveling on the trade route between Igut and Babylon. Only the 2 of them walked on foot. Madanzo was a 5th-level sorcerer and warrior, so it was not too hard for him to walk like this. A few days later, halfway through the trade route, Ammon suddenly said, Go north directly to the town of Duk from here. Madanzo asked again, Aren't we going to Link's tribe? Ammon nodded. Yes, from Duk to the east, through the jungles of the Euphrates Valley, you can reach Link's tribe. That's how I went there. Madanzo scratched the back of his head. Ammonius, I suggest another route. From here to the Babylon Kingdom, along the east bank of the Euphrates River to the city of Kish. West of the town of Akkad we've been to before, there's a new ferry to cross the river and go directly to the mountains of the Euphrates Valley. It'll be more convenient to reach Link's tribe there. Although it's a long detour, it'll be a smooth journey and faster. When we get to Link's tribe, we'll take Link and Elmar with us to explore the area around Duk. It'll be much safer this way. Didn't you say that there are many monsters in the desert and swamps? And it's not easy to pass through. Why give up the easy and seek the difficult? Ammon shook his head. Madanzo, do you know why I brought you along? This is your trial. If you want to pass the test of breaking through the limit, follow me to the north. If you want to be safer, follow the route you suggested. Go to Link's tribe first and wait for me. Madanzo smiled. It's just a suggestion. You're the god who guides me. We can go however you want. Ammon looked at Madanzo with a meaningful smile. Since you said so, you can't have any regrets. Let's make a deal first. If you encounter any trouble along the way, you'll be the first to act. If you can't handle it, I'll take action. Madanzo nodded. Of course. With me here, how can I trouble you, Ammonius? When they turned north and walked into the depths of the desert, Madanzo found that he was in trouble. Madanzo was not a pampered person. On the contrary, he could endure hardship very well. Otherwise, he would not have gone through the mountains to buy damask steel from Link's tribe. During this period of time, he was the chief steward of Montefiore, and lived a comfortable life. But at this time, walking through the desert on foot did not feel tiring. But there was always a limit to one's ability and will. Sometimes it was not that one did not want to persevere, but it was difficult to do so. Ammon suddenly sped up through the desert. Madanzo had to do his best to keep up. The temperature difference between day and night in the desert was huge. The scorching sun during the day was like a flame, and the cold air at night seemed to be able to freeze people. It was also abnormally dry. Ammon traveled day and night, regardless of the heat and cold. He used his iron staff to cast magic spells, and there was always a soft coolness wrapped around him. Schrödinger felt very comfortable in the leather bag, but Madanzo, who followed behind, was suffering. Amon only stopped twice a day. One time was to cook for Schrödinger, and he and Madanzo also ate their fill. The other time was to sit down at night to meditate and practice magic spells. After walking for 3 days, Madanzo's will and physical strength were almost at their limits. But since he had said it, he could only grit his teeth and follow Amon closely. On the 3rd night, the gods opened their eyes. After meditating and practicing magic spells, Amon said to Madanzo, "We won't hurry at night. You should have a good sleep today." He opened a tent. Chapter 105. A full moon shone on the silent desert. As far as the eye could see, there were only undulating sand dunes and boundless emptiness. There wasn't even a blade of grass, let alone people. Amon stood there with his hands behind his back and asked with a frown, "Did you hear anything?" Madanzo also frowned and listened attentively for a while before replying. There was a rustling sound and a slight buzzing, as if something hard was rubbing against the sand. But I couldn't tell where it was coming from. What did you hear? Amon waved his hand and took out a staff out of thin air. There were 7 parangons inlaid in a spiral shape on the body of the staff. It was the one he got from Abram Wellington. He handed it to Madanzo and said, "Take it, this staff is yours. Use detection magic to check the situation." Madanzo took it and said with surprise and joy, "Hey, isn't this the same as Link's staff? My Ammonius, you are so generous." Amon smiled bitterly. "Don't be too happy too early. Take the staff and prepare for battle. Don't you know the situation?" With the staff in hand, the power of detection magic multiplied by several times. He then exclaimed, "Not good. These sounds are coming from under the sand dunes. Countless scorpions are approaching from all directions. We are surrounded." As he spoke, Amon suddenly thrust the iron staff in his hand deep into the sand. A wave of impact rippled out and penetrated deep into the ground. He then shouted, "Madanzo, it's up to you now." Suddenly, countless black spots appeared on the pale white sand dunes around them. Looking down from the sky, the place where Amon and Madanzo stood became a white island in the black tide. That was the result of Amon's staff striking the ground and forcing all the scorpions to retreat from the ground. These scorpions were nearly a foot long. They raised their pincers and raised their venomous tails. They looked extremely terrifying. If it was just 1 or 2 scorpions, he might be able to stomp them to death with just a lift of his foot. Even if he was accidentally stabbed by the poisonous hooks, it wouldn't be fatal. However, there were thousands of poisonous scorpions. Anyone who saw them would tremble with fear. However, Madanzo showed no fear. He shouted loudly and waved the staff in his hand. A whirlwind rose and swirled the sand into a spiraling storm, sweeping out in a circle. The grains of sand that were blown up by the wind were like tiny needles, and there were countless wind blades that were hard to distinguish between the needles. The hard shells of the poisonous scorpions were shattered by the sand, and their bodies and chelicerae were cut off by the wind blades, leaving behind a ground full of corpses. Some scorpions had been cut in half, but their broken bodies were still struggling and twisting. This large-scale offensive air element divine spell was very powerful, but the desert scorpions did not retreat because of the death of their companion. The scorpions behind them stepped over the corpses on the ground and surged forward. Amon did not attack. He only said one thing. "These scorpions are very big and their shells are very hard. It's too much effort to use air element magic." Madanzo then raised his staff, and a bright flame appeared in the whirlwind. The flame instantly turned into a dancing fire dragon that circled between the sand dunes. The scorpions' remains were the first to be ignited. Then the scorpions that surged forward also twisted and rolled in the sea of fire, and were burnt to ashes. Faint smoke rose in all directions, mixed with an unpleasant stench. Amon spoke again. "Scorpions have venom in their bodies. With so much venom around us, the smoke will be very poisonous." There was no need for Amon to remind him. Madanzo did not stop the whirlwind while casting Sea of Fire. Instead, he blew the smoke outwards. These scorpions seemed to be very resistant to fire. Many of them were still struggling to crawl closer with flames and smoke, but were cut into pieces by the wind blades not far away. At this moment, Madanzo was casting 2 kinds of large-scale advanced-level magic at the same time. He couldn't go on like this. After a while he shouted, "Godamon, are we in a scorpion nest? There's no need to waste time like this. Why should we be surrounded by a group of scorpions? Let's just go. The scorpions can't catch up with us." Amon pulled out his staff and put away the tent. He nodded and said, "Then let's go. You break out." Madanzo pointed his staff forward, and the whirlwind converged into a straight line and shot out, blowing a wide trench in the sand. The scorpions were swept to the sides. The flames disappeared, and then turned into a cold. The scorpions nearby were stiff on the ground, and the scorpions a little further away seemed to be affected by the cold and slowed down. Madanzo took the opportunity to stride forward, and Amon followed behind with his leather bag. Casting water magic in the dry desert was strenuous and unrewarding, but when used with wind shuttle and freeze, the cold was a good way to deal with these scorpions. It might not be able to freeze them to death, but as long as they could stop them from moving forward, they could break out of the encirclement. The 2 walked unhurriedly among the scorpions. Madanzo pointed his staff forward and opened a path. When the sky was getting brighter, there were fewer scorpions around them. There were still endless white dunes around them. Madanzo finally breathed a sigh of relief and turned to Amon. "How come there are so many scorpions? Have you encountered them before?" Amon shook his head. "There are scorpions in the desert, and there have been people who were accidentally bitten to death. I've heard of it since I was a child, but I've never heard of so many scorpions. Maybe the environment changed after the flood." Madanzo frowned. "These scorpions are obviously too big, and they look very poisonous." "They are not ordinary sand scorpions, are they?" While speaking, he suddenly stamped his foot and killed a scorpion that suddenly burrowed out of the sand. He cursed. "Why are there more? Is there no end to them?" Amon suddenly thought of something and said, "Before coming here, I heard that there are monsters in this area. It seems that these scorpions are also one of the monsters. I once saw a scroll of myths and legends in the Temple of Isis, called the Land of Marduk. It recorded that the town of Duk was once the battlefield of the gods. A long time ago, the gods created 9 kinds of monsters to help them in the battle, namely, 9-headed serpent, scorpion, sea monster, giant lion, 3-headed hound, human-faced scorpion, mermaid and wild bull. 9-headed serpent? Asked Madanzo. Isn't that Humbaba, the god of the Euphrates River? It is said that he was the gatekeeper of Enlil's realm. He was killed by Gilgamesh and Enkidu not long ago. Amon nodded. The 9-headed serpent is probably Humbaba. He must have been subdued by Enlil in that great battle, and became the gatekeeper of the divine realm. Although Humbaba is dead, he still has many descendants. I've met them in the Euphrates River. If Humbaba has descendants, then other monsters might have. The human-faced scorpion is one of the 9 monsters. The scorpions we met may be its descendants." Madanzo stuck out his tongue. "Then we have to be careful. Maybe we will run into some poisonous insects or beasts." Amon nodded again. "Yes. If we run into them, don't get entangled with them. We should avoid them as much as possible. We're not here to destroy the monsters. We can't do that with just the 2 of us. We're just here to check out the situation here, and get to Duk as soon as possible." As they continued to move forward, the 2 of them slowed down. There were always poisonous scorpions appearing in this desert. They would suddenly drill out of the sand, sometimes in groups, sometimes only 5 or 6 of them. Almost every day, they had to fight several battles, big or small. Madanzo was almost stung by a scorpion. Amon just followed behind and did not do anything. He let Madanzo deal with everything. 7 or 8 days later, they could see sparse grass in the desert. "Madanzo, can you hold on?" asked Amon. Metatro took a few breaths and said, "Ever since I started practicing magic, the number of magic I've used in the past few days is less than the number of magic I've used. The opponent is just a scorpion, but it can't be sustained. Who knows when it will appear? If it weren't for you, Ammonius, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to hold on much longer." On the same day that Amon and Madanzo decided to turn north from the trade route, 3 people were having a meeting in the shrine of Saya Enril. They were an old man and his 2 young disciples. Goliath's appearance had not changed much. He still had a goatee and a face full of wrinkles, but his eyes seemed to be clearer and deeper than 2 years ago. He asked Raphael, "Have you been practicing magic all this time?" Raphael replied, "Magic practice has been my hobby since I was a child, and I'm used to it. 2 years ago, Master sent me to Duk to explore the terrain. Because of an accident, I stopped practicing magic for a while, but since then I have never stopped practicing." Goliath asked, "Half a year ago, I sent you to Charcoal Marsh to investigate the monsters there. It was much more dangerous than the mission 2 years ago. Did you stop practicing magic?" Raphael replied respectfully, "Yes, under your guidance, it has become a kind of self-awareness. I don't have to remind myself what to do. I do it naturally every day. Basic meditation is also a way to restore magic. Only in this way can I persist in that dangerous environment and finally complete the mission Master gave me." Goliath smiled and asked again, "Young man, in such a dangerous environment, do you know why you can always turn danger into safety?" Raphael showed a thoughtful look. "I also have questions in my heart. At that time, there were several encounters that were really dangerous, but I always got through them safely, as if I was blessed by the gods." Goliath smiled and shook his head. "Maybe you really got the favor of the gods, but the person who protected you at that time was Walter. I deliberately sent him to follow you secretly, but you didn't know." Raphael was taken aback. He stood up and said to Walter, "So it was you who protected me? Then you should have saved me several times. Why didn't you tell me?" Walter smiled slightly. "Master didn't let me tell you at that time." Raphael knelt down and saluted. "Even if you didn't tell me at that time, it has been half a year since I completed the mission, and you haven't mentioned it for so long. You have secretly saved me so many times, but I have never expressed my gratitude." Walter still smiled. "This is what I should do, and it is what I am willing to do. If Master didn't let me say it, then I wouldn't say it. Since Master has said it today, then I will say it. I am only completing the mission, and I don't ask for any gratitude. Of course at this moment, I also accept your gratitude. Get up, my brother." He pulled Raphael up. Goliath looked at Walter again and said, "This state of mind is very good. For the past 6 months, I deliberately did not tell you, Raphael, and you yourself did not take it to heart. Walter, have you ever thought about when you will become a supreme mage? I have taught many students in the Hittite kingdom, but the one who is most likely to become the first supreme mage is you." The 6th level mage Walter replied humbly, "It is not a matter of whether I want to or not. I am afraid that all the mages on the continent want to take this step, but it is not a wish that comes out of thin air. When faced with this goal, I can only decide what I will do and not think too much about it." Goliath nodded with satisfaction. "Very good. I hope you mean what you say and can really do it. This time, I will send the 2 of you to carry out another mission. Set off together across the Saya Desert, and then go to the city of Uruk in Babylon, and the Cape States in Igut respectively. Send a secret letter to the 2 governors, Gilgamesh and Roddik respectively. Come back when you get an answer, no matter what it is." The 9th level Supreme Mage took out 2 sealed leather cylinders and handed them to his students. "You are not allowed to open them yourselves. The contents of the letter may also bring you trouble. If there is any trouble, try to solve it on your own, and bring the reply to me. It may be a little troublesome to cross the Saya Desert now. Try not to fight the powerful monsters, and make sure you pass safely. Here are a few scrolls and a flying instrument. If your life is in danger, Walter, use it to escape with Raphael. But this is also a trial. Do not use the scrolls or the flying instrument until the last moment." Amon and Madanzo had walked to the edge of the desert. From time to time, they could see low, cold-resistant grass growing on the sand dunes. Counting the distance, they would reach the inland lake in another day. This kind of grassy sand dunes was also the most suitable environment for scorpions to grow. Madanzo involuntarily raised his vigilance, but after walking for a long time, he did not see any scorpions. He could not help but sigh. "It's really strange today. Why haven't I seen a single scorpion?" Amon laughed. Haven't you been annoyed by the scorpions these days? Do you want to meet a group of scorpions? Metatro, who looked tired, also laughed. That's not what I mean. I can't wait to relax. We've been on tenterhooks until now, but there's no movement at the place where we're most likely to encounter scorpions. It's better to have a good fight and get out of here quickly. Amon said, the most dangerous enemy is the invisible enemy. This feeling is really torturous. But you have to be mentally prepared. Even if we get out of the desert and get rid of the scorpions, there may be something waiting in front of us, maybe even more difficult to deal with than the scorpions. Huh. There are marks on the sand over there. What are they? There were very strange marks on the sand dunes in front of them. They looked like frozen ripples on the surface of the water. Medanzo walked closer and bent down to observe. He took a deep breath and said, I can't be more familiar with these marks. They are the footprints of scorpions crawling through the sand. But these scorpions are too big. Each of them is probably more than 3 feet long. It seems they are heading in the same direction. What happened? Let's take this opportunity to get out of here. Amon waved his hand. Don't worry. Let me see what those scorpions are doing. It'll be safer if we can figure it out. He took out a magic artifact embedded in a golden base. It was the soul-chasing lamp he got from Vitru's relic. He stood in front of the marks and gently waved his staff. The magic artifact embedded in the wick of the lamp emitted a circular halo of light. The scene in the halo was constantly changing, as if it was following the scorpion's footprints on the sand dunes. After crossing countless sand dunes, the scene in front of them was already dozens of miles away. Amon and Medanzo saw a group of giant scorpions. Each scorpion was more than 3 feet long from pincers to tail. Their shells were black and shiny like hard armor. From time to time, the tip of their hooked tails would shoot out pale blue flames. They were terrifying giant scorpions. The flames shot out from their hooked tails were in a straight line and could attack targets from very far away. Not only was the scorpion poisonous, but it was also accompanied by a high temperature. Even a little bit of it could be fatal. These scorpions didn't always shoot their venom. Instead, they lined up in a formation similar to a military formation. They protected each other and attacked each other, waiting for the right opportunity to strike. The flames they shot out were only long-range attacks. The most threatening weapons were their thick pincers and hooked tails. There were hundreds of scorpions, and all of them were giant scorpions. It was a terrifying sight to behold. In the middle of the scorpions were 2 young men. They were waving their staffs. Obviously, they were both mages. Their magic power was profound, and their skills were extraordinary. They were able to cast all kinds of large-scale defensive and offensive magic. The older mage was in charge of the attack, while the younger one was in charge of the defense. They tried to break through the encirclement, but in the end they were unable to do so. Around them were the bodies of nearly 100 giant scorpions. Some were scorched, some were cut into pieces, some were frozen, and some were exploded by a tremendous force. It was hard to tell how many kinds of magic the 2 mages had used. Amon shook the staff in his hand lightly, and the light of the lamp expanded rapidly. What he focused on was the corpses of the giant scorpions. 2 days ago, he and Metatro had also encountered a scorpion. Naturally, he knew the effects of various kinds of magic attacks. If the scorpion was burned by the high temperature of the fire element magic, it would turn into ashes, leaving behind a hard shell that would crack at the slightest touch. But looking at the scorpions that had been burned, their pincers and stingers were intact, shining in the sand and ashes. The effect of fire magic attacks was not very good, and it would ignite poisonous smoke. The 2 mages changed their methods after trying it out. The scorpion corpses that were left behind were destroyed with other magic. Whether it was spatial slash or windblade, the scorpion corpses should have been torn apart. But Amon found that there was a palm-sized hard carapace on the back of the giant scorpions that was intact. One could imagine how hard it was. The pincers, stingers, and carapace of these giant scorpions were all good materials for processing weapons or magic artifacts. What's more, there were so many of them. As the successor of Nietzsche, Amon immediately thought of them. Chapter 106. Judging from the magic they used, the older one was a 6th-level mage, and the younger one was a 5th-level mage. Their skills were not simple. They were definitely not ordinary mages. Even Amon admired them. He had never seen an advanced mage who could use various kinds of magic so perfectly. If it had been another 2 mages of the same level, they would have been killed by the scorpion's tail. But these 2 did not show any signs of defeat. They were just struggling. It seemed that it would not be easy to break out of the encirclement. Amon frowned and said, "A 5th-level mage and a 6th-level mage. They are definitely the disciples of the best mages. In terms of magic alone, they are not inferior to you or me. If you and I join, the 4 of us can definitely deal with these giant scorpions. Why not help them along the way? We can also make friends. It's rare to meet a mage like this." Madanzo waved his staff and said, "Well, let's do it. We've been annoyed by the scorpions these days. We want to vent our anger when we meet these big guys." Amon waved his hand and took out a long sword and a short shield. He said, "Put away your staff. You will pretend to be an advanced warrior who has undergone the second awakening of his power. I will pretend to be a 6th-level mage. We practice the power of 2 sides. It's not suitable to be used in public. Make friends with these 2 masters and collect some materials. We can take them to Link's tribe to make a batch of tools." Warret and Raphael were engaged in a bitter struggle with the mutated giant scorpions. Several times they tried to break out of the encirclement, but the mutated giant scorpions always found the right time to spray burning venom, slowing them down. Such a battle was the most helpless for a mage, because the scorpions would not negotiate with them. Even if they killed many scorpions, there would still be more coming. Walter had scrolls with him that could instantly break out of the encirclement with Raphael, but he had not used them. He also knew that Raphael had scrolls with him. Goliath had specially taught them to protect themselves before leaving, and Raphael had insisted on not using them. He only cooperated with Walter to fight the giant scorpions with his own power. Teacher Goliath had said that going through this path was also a test and experience. Raphael rarely had this kind of experience. The young man did not know that he was on the verge of breaking through from the 5th level to the 6th level. Raphael was the nephew of the Prime Minister of the Hittite Kingdom. Even without his family background, he was Goliath's favorite student. Most people would respect him and give in. It was rare to see such a scene. But these scorpions did not care who he was. Goliath had sent Raphael to carry out difficult and dangerous tasks twice in order to create an environment for him to gain experience. As long as he did not flinch, Warret would cooperate and protect him. He would not resort to other means until the last moment. Hundreds of giant scorpions had been killed, but there were still nearly 300 scorpions left. It seemed that it was impossible to break out of the encirclement like this. Walter sighed inwardly. He had already prepared 2 supreme scrolls and could use them at any time. At this moment, Walter was suddenly startled. He sensed a powerful force erupting behind a distant dune. He immediately held the scrolls and shouted, "Raphael, be careful. Another master is coming. Is it a bigger scorpion?" Of course it was not a scorpion. Then they heard a violent explosion. At the edge of the encirclement, 5 or 6 giant scorpions seemed to be torn to pieces by a force of spatial distortion. Their carapaces and body fragments splashed in all directions. Raphael whispered, "It's a helper, at least a 6th-level mage." Then he shouted, "May I ask which friend has come?" "Walter and Raphael, the High Priest of Saya. Thank you for your help." A loud voice answered from behind the dune. "Wandering warrior Madanzo and Mage Allaha are passing by and have come to lend a hand." Following the voice, a warrior had already crossed the sand dune and was approaching with large strides. He held a short shield in his left hand to protect himself, and with his right hand, he waved his sword and chopped a few scorpions that were surging towards him into pieces. The giant scorpions also realized that they had encountered a master of close combat. They actually had a little intelligence and knew how to fight together. The scorpions nearby retreated, but several scorpions in the distance shot out poisonous flames in a crisscross manner. Madanzo raised his shield and spun the tip of his sword in the air. A spiral of air rose and slightly changed the direction of the poisonous flames, trying to block them with the shield. Walter shouted again. Warrior, the poisonous flames can corrode armor and weapons. Be careful of your shield. Before his voice died away, the poisonous flames scattered in front of the shield. Sand and dust rose and floated in the air like pale yellow clouds, wrapping around the poisonous flames and then exploding. Another man appeared on the dune behind Madanzo, holding a staff in his right hand and a ventosculum in his left. It was Amon. Since he had asked Madanzo to give him an alias, he did not want to appear with his original identity. He took out another staff in his hand. Although it was also very good, it was far inferior to the iron staff. It was the most common way of fighting for a mage to have a warrior in the front while he cast magic to support the attack from behind. Madanzo strode into the swarm of scorpions and cut open a path. Amon followed behind, collecting the stinger, pincers, and the strange carapace scattered on the sand. The swarm of scorpions split into two groups, trying to surround them separately. However, Metatro took the lead with his sword and was unstoppable. The four of them quickly converged. Walter and Raphael said in unison, "Thank you so much for coming to our rescue in such a dangerous place." This gratitude came from the bottom of their hearts. Although they had the means to protect themselves, the price was not small. It was best not to use them. Moreover, in this barren desert, instead of avoiding a large group of mutant scorpions, they rushed in to save them. This was an admirable behavior in any case. Madanzo said with a slightly proud expression, "It is fate that we met. It is best for me to make friends with all kinds of heroes when I travel the continent. You two are young but have extraordinary achievements. You dare to walk in this desert. It is only right for you to help." Amon waved his staff and said, "Let's not talk nonsense. Let's talk after we deal with these scorpions." The four of them joined together to form a small battle formation, which immediately increased their power. Madanzo was at the forefront, waving his sword and slashing. Amon and Walter walked 2 steps behind, side by side, protecting Madanzo with magic, while Raphael walked at the rear. The giant scorpions moved very fast, crawling quickly with their footsteps, always in a state of encirclement. The four of them were not afraid at all. They crossed several sand dunes and killed nearly 100 giant scorpions. Madanzo was exhausted, while Amon took a break and collected a lot of materials. Seeing that the scorpions were difficult to deal with, Walter was about to ask Madanzo to retreat and rest for a while. Unexpectedly, these scorpions also seemed to understand the situation. Feeling that the few of them could not deal with them, they suddenly scattered and disappeared into the sand. Madanzo lowered his sword and gasped, "Huh, why did they all run?" Amon muttered, "These giant scorpions are different from ordinary scorpions. They know how to cooperate and have a bit of intelligence. When they realized that they could not deal with the four of us, they retreated. It's a bit like a marching army." Walter nodded. "I also realized that these giant scorpions are different from ordinary poisonous insects. It seems that they have undergone simple training. That's why they are more terrifying. Otherwise, we would have broken out a long time ago. Thank you two heroes for saving us. I haven't had a chance to ask for your advice." Raphael and Madanzo were almost exhausted. They sat on the sand dune to rest, always on guard. Amon called himself Allaha. He was a mage from the Empire of Igut, and loved to work with all kinds of magic artifacts. He came here mainly to train himself and collect materials, which explained his actions just now. Madanzo called himself a warrior from the kingdom of Babylon. He was once rescued by Allaha in the mountains, and the two became good friends. He liked adventure and longed for the legendary heroic deeds. Coming to this desolate place to kill monsters was not only to help his friends, but also to train himself. There was no need to hide his identity, and what he said was almost the truth. But the origin of Raphael and Walter surprised Amon. When he heard that they were high priests of the Saya Shrine, Amon was very surprised. High priests of the Saya Shrine were one of the noblest people in the Saya Shrine. When Amon was in Duk, he could hardly imagine that he would have dealings with such important people. What was even more surprising was that the two high priests did not bring any attendants or guards with them. Even ordinary mages would not do such a thing on foot in the Saya desert. These two noble lords claimed to be carrying out the orders of their teacher. They had gone to Uruk and Cape States to deliver letters. Their teacher was the 9th-level Supreme Mage Goliath. Amon had seen Goliath before. One night he saw Goliath quarreling in Crazy Ole's house. Later, Goliath and Crazy Ole went to Mayor Dusty's house and flew away from the window. Later, he learned that the man was the chief priest of Saya, the 8th-level Supreme Mage Goliath. The next day, Mayor Dusty found an excuse to send Amon to Duk to avoid the disaster that followed. Crazy Ole also mentioned Goliath in his message. He told Amon that if he encountered any trouble in the Saya, he could go to Goliath for help. This Supreme Mage was trustworthy. At least he would not harm Amon. Not many people could receive such praise from Crazy Ole. Amon did not expect to meet Goliath's students in the desert today. Indeed, a great teacher produces a great disciple. Goliath himself had advanced to the 9th level, becoming the top existence on the continent. Amon did not tell Walter and Raphael about his origins. He had nothing to ask Goliath for help at the moment. They chatted for a while. Amon also made a delicious lunch, and invited everyone to enjoy it together. Raphael warmly invited Amon and Madanzo to visit Saya if they had the opportunity. He would definitely thank them well. Walter saw that everyone had rested enough. He got up and said, "Lord Allah, you must be very rich to have such a spatial artifact. You are also an artifact maker. You must have all kinds of artifacts. But please accept this scroll. It's a token of my appreciation. It might come in handy when you're exploring the desert." Walter took out an intermediate scroll, Spatial Shackles, which Amon was very familiar with. He had used 2 scrolls himself. It was indeed a very practical auxiliary means of escape in dangerous situations. Amon could not refuse and had to accept the gift. Walter cautiously said, "Be careful in the desert. Don't get entangled with powerful poisonous insects and beasts. No matter how precious the materials are, they are not as valuable as your own life. The giant scorpions have retreated. Maybe they will summon more powerful monsters to attack us. We can't stay here for long. Let's go. Welcome to Saya." Amon's reaction was beyond everyone's expectation. He suddenly stood up and took out his iron staff out of thin air. He embedded the ventusum into the staff in a blur. He said in a deep voice, "I'm afraid it's too late. Everyone be careful. There are powerful enemies nearby." Walter was shocked. He was already a 6th-level mage, and his reaction and experience were far superior to his peers. He did not expect that Amon's reaction was even sharper than his. Moreover, he took out such a magical staff. It meant that Amon did not use his full strength in the battle just now. Madanzo and Raphael had already jumped up from the ground with their weapons and staffs in their hands. Lead immediately sensed a strong sense of danger, and turned to look in the same direction as Amon. A strange scene appeared not far away. 3 sand dunes slowly rose up in front of them. The sand at the top kept leaking, and the sand at the bottom kept gushing out. The sand dunes rose higher and higher until they turned into the shape of a human. When the sand dunes stopped rising and all the sand fell, 3 monsters appeared in front of them. The one in the middle was a man, more than 20 feet tall. His upper body was in the shape of a human, but his hands had turned into a pair of huge pincers, and his lower body was in the shape of a scorpion. He stood on the sand dunes with 6 feet, and his tail was 30 feet long. At the end of the tail was a huge curved hook that looked like a spear. The monster's humanoid upper body was extremely muscular, and there were flame-shaped patterns on his cheeks. His eyes were completely dark brown, and there were no whites in them at all. He looked down at the 4 of them coldly. Walter gasped and subconsciously murmured to himself, "The legendary Scorpion King, the human-faced scorpion created by the gods." Amon said in a deep voice, "Don't panic. It's not impossible to fight 4 against 1. As he spoke, he not only took out his iron staff, but also 3 scrolls out of thin air in his right hand. He told the others not to panic, but he himself was not as calm as usual. He even said something wrong. Because they weren't fighting 4 against 1, they were facing 3 powerful enemies. Chapter 107. Strange Vows. The 2 naked women with scorpion tails were holding staffs in their hands, made of an unknown animal's long bone. The one on the left had a flame spirit at the top of her bone staff, and the one on the right had a aquaticore at the top of her bone staff. Are there mages among the monsters too? The giant man in the middle, with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a scorpion, should be the legendary Scorpion King Gilgamesh, a monster created by the fallen ancient gods, and had the same origin as Humbaba. Unfortunately, and the others were not Gilgamesh and Enkidu, so it was almost impossible to kill Gilgamesh. Raphael quietly said to Walter through message magic, "The Scorpion King cannot be defeated. Throw away the scrolls, take out the flying shuttle, and escape." Walter quietly replied, "My flying shuttle can only take 2 people. They just risked their lives to save me. I can't just leave them behind." Goliath gave Walter a flying artifact, which could allow him to quickly escape with Raphael in a moment of crisis. He also gave him 3 flying scrolls to help him activate the flying shuttle. But with Walter's ability, he could only use the flying shuttle for himself and Raphael. The 2 high priests were loyal and did not run away immediately. Raphael quietly said, "At least the Scorpion King can talk. It's not that we can't negotiate, but it's best not to fight." They were whispering here, and Madanzo could not hear them. But unexpectedly, the Scorpion King Gilgamesh heard them and suddenly said, "Despicable humans, there are such idiots? What are you 2 talking about? You think you can escape, but you don't? Then try it." His voice was low and hoarse, like something hard rubbing against each other, with the echo of metal colliding. Only Metatro did not know how powerful he was. With a one by his side, Metatro had always been very bold. He waved his sword and was about to form a battle formation in the front like he did just now, but unexpectedly, he was pulled behind by A1. A took a few steps forward and stood in front of the crowd. His voice was very calm, and without a trace of trembling he asked, "Are you the legendary human-faced Scorpion King?" The Scorpion King nodded his huge head. "Yes, I am Gilgamesh, and they are the Fire Scorpion and the Ice Scorpion. Despicable humans, you do not beg for mercy when facing me, but want to make a last-ditch struggle?" When he spoke, his eyes that had no whites flashed, and even the Scorpion King's wrath showed a trace of fear. Metatro and the rest did not see this, but I had already taken out a gray scroll and held it in front of him. He held it in his hand and replied, "What's the use of begging? May I ask the great Scorpion King, it is said that you possess the power of the gods. Why do you appear in front of lowly mortals?" The Scorpion King snorted coldly, "Despicable human, you actually dare to ask me? You clearly know that they are my people, but you still killed so many. Do you think your life is more noble than the Scorpions?" I shook his head. "I don't think my life is more noble than the Scorpions, but I also don't think the Scorpions are more noble than me. But your Majesty Scorpion King, you call me a despicable human, so you must think that you are more noble than all of us?" I shook his head. "I don't think that my life is more noble than the Scorpions, but I also don't think that the Scorpions are more noble than me. But your Majesty Scorpion King, you call me a despicable human, so you must think that you are more noble than all of us?" As he spoke, he gently twirled Storm's wrath with his fingers, as though he was ready to open it at any time, as though giving a silent warning. "Since you are such a noble human-faced Scorpion King, then there is no need to perish together with the lowly humans." The Scorpion King suddenly laughed. His laughter was like the buzzing sound of sand rubbing together, almost enough to make people dizzy. He sneered and said, "What a bold person. You actually didn't kneel and pray when you saw me. I admire your courage, so I have decided to give you a chance. 2 of you must pay for the lives of my people, and I will let the other 2 go. You choose who will die." The Scorpion King had sharp ears and eyes. He had already discovered that Walter and Raphael were not in cahoots with It was the 2 mages who had clashed with the giant scorpions, resulting in the battle just now. He did not want to become enemies with Wrath, but he made such a request. The Scorpion King's request was an order, and his cold tone did not allow for any discussion. Behind him, Walter and Raphael looked at each other, and made a decision with their eyes. If I chose the 2 of them, they would immediately use their flying artifacts to escape. Madanzo whispered from behind, "Don't be fooled, this Scorpion King is very cunning. He wants to break up our alliance and win without a fight. I shook his head and said, I have no right to choose who will die. Whether it is a human or a scorpion, it is a choice made by oneself. We did not actively harm any of the scorpions. We were just constantly attacked by the scorpions in the desert. Everything was out of self-defense. It does not matter whose life is more noble. Scorpion King, if you were me, please answer, should we kill those scorpions? Fire Scorpion, who was on the left of the Scorpion King, finally could not help but speak. Her voice was slightly hoarse, but it carried a certain magnetism. You have killed so many of His Majesty's people. What is so unfair about only 2 lives? I shook his head and said, we killed so many scorpions, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. The scorpions we met along the way were different from normal scorpions. Such heavy casualties can only be blamed on one person, but I'm not sure if it can be used to describe it. Fire Scorpion asked in return, who is to blame? Raphael, who was behind spoke up, those scorpions have intelligence. It is obvious that they have been trained. However, the person who trained them used their intelligence to send them to their deaths. They know how to attack and coordinate, but the purpose of the battle is incomprehensible. Such attacks are meaningless, and will only waste their lives. Whoever drove and trained them should be responsible for their deaths. The Scorpion King's face turned ugly, while the Ice Scorpion on the right spoke up. Her voice was clear, and seemed to carry some sort of charm. Isn't this what you humans learned? Those scorpions have gained intelligence, but they have been infected by humans, which is why they have become so terrible. As a despicable human, you should feel ashamed. Alien shook his head and said, Scorpion with a staff, you are wrong. Humans are not only despicable and terrible as you understand them to be, but also think and pursue all things beautiful. The eyes of the lowly can only see the lowliness of others. Those scorpions have gained intelligence, but they are not real humans. If you think that is unique to humans, then you are destroying the glory of humans. Walter also stepped forward and stood in front of Raphael, saying, Your Excellency Scorpion King, please allow me to call you Your Excellency. You trained those scorpions like a battle formation, ordering them to launch meaningless attacks in the desert. Are you trying to cultivate a scorpion army in this way? My name is Walter, and my companion Raphael and I are the high priests of the Shrine of Saya Enril. Our teacher is the chief priest of the Shrine of Saya, and is also a 9th-level supreme mage. He commands the soldiers and civilians of the city, and is much stronger than your scorpion army. But we will not start a meaningless war, and let the soldiers and civilians die needlessly. Madanzo also said, Since we are not injured today, we can forget about this matter. Your scorpions are dead, you should go back and think about it. Also, you 2 beautiful scorpions, I would like to ask, you keep saying that you despise humans, so why do you still take human form? After the initial panic, they realized that the Scorpion King only moved its mouth instead of its hands. On the other hand, was calm and composed. The few of them also calmed down, and began to reason with each other. They were all quite eloquent. The Scorpion King's face was very ugly, and the flame-like tattoos on his cheeks changed color. Without waiting for the 2 scorpions to speak, he replied in a deep voice, This is not the appearance of a human, but the appearance of a god. Legend has it that the gods created humans in their own image. They have a godlike body, but foolish humans do not know how to cherish it. I said in a deep voice, We cherish our bodies, so we do not want to be hurt by your scorpions. Scorpion King, I would like to ask you another question. Is it possible that humans created gods in their own image? Do you know how to become a god? Or do you want to become a real god? If that is the case, Your Majesty Scorpion King, how about we make an agreement today? Only Ah understood that the Scorpion King did not attack, because he did not want to perish together with his enemies. Of course, he did not want to use the Doomsday Scroll, but it was not a good idea to be in a deadlock with this arrogant and powerful Scorpion King. He had to find a way for him to step down. Ah's words caused Walter and the rest to be dumbfounded. The Scorpion King's expression changed a few times, as though something was on his mind. After a long silence, he finally nodded and said, Interesting person, what is your name and what agreement do you wish to make with me? Ah replied, I am Allah. The agreement is simple. As long as your scorpion army does not initiate an attack, me and my tribesmen will not harm your subordinates. The desert is not a suitable place for humans to live. If you wish to have your own divine realm, feel free to try. In fact, you should be glad that you met us and not Enkidu and Gilgamesh. Think about Humbaba's fate. And we should also be glad that we happened to meet your Majesty Scorpion King, and not be surrounded by the mutated giant scorpions. Us words caused Walter to be secretly shocked. He also hurriedly said, I represent Saya to make the same agreement with your Majesty Scorpion King. Do you know that this desert is within Saya's territory? The Scorpion King narrowed his eyes and asked, High Priest, why don't you represent the Temple of Enril? Walter shook his head and said, With my identity, I do not have that qualification. I can only represent Saya to make an agreement with you. The Scorpion King then asked how do I know who is your tribesman? Raised the iron branch in his hand and said, This is my staff. It's very special, you should be able to recognize it. If my tribesmen pass through your territory, they will carry this staff with them. The Scorpion King thought for a moment and asked, What if someone violates the agreement? I laughed. Then, mighty and noble Scorpion King, you can appear like a god and mete out punishment without suffering vengeance, hatred, or curses. In order to make the agreement official, we must all swear an oath. The Scorpion King let out another contemptuous sneer. Are human oaths valid? What kind of oath do you want to make? I replied unhurriedly. Your oath is that if you violate it, you will never become a god. My oath is that if I violate it, I will forever be a lowly human. Walter and the rest behind him had strange expressions on their faces. What kind of oath was that? It was absolute nonsense, and this Scorpion King's mind was indeed different from the average human. He actually nodded and said, The 4 of you must all swear the same oath. Only then will it work. Madanzo tried his best not to laugh, and pointed at the fire scorpion and the ice scorpion behind Then the 3 of you must also swear the same oath. Only then will it be fair. Unexpectedly, the Scorpion King straightforwardly said, All right, it's a deal. Walter and Raphael looked at each other, wanting to laugh but not daring to. Thus, the 4 of them and the 3 scorpion demons made their respective oaths. The Scorpion King waved his huge pincers, which turned back into human hands. His lower body also turned back into human form, looking completely like a muscular man. He pointed at and the rest and said, Please remember today's agreement and abide by your oath. Quicksand surged up and enveloped the 3 scorpion demons. The sand dune then calmed down, and the Scorpion King and his 2 subordinates were nowhere to be seen. Madanzo patted his chest and said, Allaha, you're really amazing. You sent the Scorpion King away just like that? I thought you were going to stay here today. I had already kept his Tiamat's wrath, holding onto the iron branch with one hand. He turned to Madanzo and said, Quick, help me up. Madanzo quickly stepped forward to support one of Us' arms, and asked in surprise, What's wrong with you? Why are you covered in cold sweat? I waved his hand without saying a word. Walter and Raphael stepped forward and saluted. Sir Allaha, it's all thanks to your wisdom and bravery that we were able to escape this calamity. We're also very grateful that you didn't choose to hand us over to the Scorpion King when we were threatened. I laughed bitterly. I don't have the qualifications to do that. If I really did that, the one who would die would be me. Let's go. Don't you still need to deliver the letter? It's better to leave this place as soon as possible. Walter nodded. We'll leave now. The 2 of you shouldn't stay for too long. I look forward to meeting you in Saya. He then threw out a shuttle-shaped artifact, which turned into a ship-shaped space that wrapped around himself and Raphael, as they flew into the sky. In midair, he unfurled a flying scroll, and the shuttle suddenly sped up and disappeared into the horizon. I looked at the direction where the shuttle disappeared and said, Those 2 are really not bad. They could have run away on their own, but they chose to stay and fight with us. Chapter 108. Ahmad replied, That's a wind-riding shuttle. The materials needed to make it are very rare. It's also very difficult to make it successfully. You can use a ventusselve to create a magical space and activate it with high-grade air magic. It can carry you in flight. It's a very precious artifact. It should be given by the supreme mage Goliath for self-defense. Madanzo blinked and asked, if we have a wind-riding shuttle like this, can you also carry me in flight? Ahmad nodded. Yes, I can also use high-grade air magic. My magic power is no weaker than Walter's. If we have a wind-riding shuttle, of course we can carry you in flight. Madanzo's face was full of yearning. How much does one cost? Is there a place to sell it? Ahmad smiled bitterly. I've never heard of anyone willing to sell this kind of thing. Only a great shrine with a strong foundation can own it. If you can collect enough materials, you can try to make it yourself. Madanzo leaned closer and asked, Ahmad, do you know how to make it? I don't mind dragging Link with me to collect all kinds of materials. How much does it cost to make such a shuttle? Ahmad glanced at him and answered unhurriedly. You need a ventusselve as the core of the artifact. It's worth 500 parangons, and you may not be able to buy it. I have a ventusselve, but it's already been made into a spatial artifact. I can't use it to make a wind-riding shuttle. Even if you can collect all the materials, including the ventusselve, and understand the method of making an artifact, there's no guarantee of success. Even an outstanding artifact master has a chance of failure. Calculate the cost yourself. Madanzo didn't reply for a long time. Ahmad continued, if you really want to, wait until we reach Link's tribe. I will teach you the blueprints of several kinds of artifacts and the method of making them. Whether you can collect the materials and successfully make it all depends on you. Link is better at making artifacts than you are. You can ask him for help. Even if you can't make a wind-riding shuttle, you can make something else. Madanzo was excited again. In my mind, you have always been an omniscient and omnipotent god. One waved his staff and said, don't just praise me. Have you rested enough? We should also leave this place quickly. Madanzo, who was fatigued for the past few days, once again made his way through the desert. The Scorpion King seemed to have kept his word, and they did not encounter any more attacks from the scorpions. This encounter made Madanzo very excited, and he couldn't help but mention it. On the way, he said to Walter and Raphael didn't run away at the first opportunity, but it might not be entirely because of loyalty. With the capabilities of the Scorpion King, they might not have been able to escape on the wind shuttle at the first opportunity. Thought for a moment, then shook his head and replied, it's indeed difficult to escape, but when you start the shuttle, you can use an intermediate magic scroll called Dimensional Confinement as a cover. They probably have this kind of scroll in their hands. The Scorpion King might be able to stop it with all his might, but it's not worth it if the price is too high. As they walked, Madanzo suddenly said to himself, so interesting, so sexy, so seductive, such a good figure. One turned his head and said, your expression is so strange. Who are you talking about? Madanzo said, ice scorpions and fire scorpions, god, don't you think so? One's expression was also a bit strange. They are demons after all. They can transform into human form, but come out without clothes. Why are you thinking about them? Are you tempted by women again? Madanzo smiled and said, it's normal for men to be tempted occasionally, but I don't dare to touch women like that. They have scorpion stingers on them. If I were to get stung by them, it wouldn't feel good. What about the scorpions? Why are you thinking about the scorpions? Madanzo laughed and said, if I don't think about this kind of thing, where do you want me to think? The Scorpion King is really lucky. While and Madanzo were chatting, Walter and Raphael were also talking about the dangerous encounter they had just experienced. They had reached the southern part of the Saya Desert, and were about to go their separate ways. Putting away the wind shuttle, they were sitting between two sand dunes to rest. Raphael said, I didn't expect to meet the Scorpion King this time and make such an agreement. You made an agreement with the Scorpion King on behalf of Saya. This is a good thing. Teacher will be happy. When we go back, we must announce this news as soon as possible. Walter said in a low voice, the Scorpion King is not stupid. Such an agreement is not bad for him, so he will agree on the spot. The most unexpected thing this time was meeting that Allah. I have a feeling that the Scorpion King did not make a move because he was afraid of him. Otherwise, he would not have talked about making an agreement. Raphael also frowned. How can a 6th-level mage make the Scorpion King afraid? He may have some kind of secret, a means to restrain the Scorpion King. I heard that those monsters have unknown weaknesses. Walter added. That's not the point. What surprised me was the oath he made with the Scorpion King. If he violated it, one could never become a god, and the other would always be a human. Isn't it the same meaning? And it's complete nonsense. But they all looked serious. The Scorpion King does not joke. There must be a deeper meaning. Raphael echoed. I don't understand it either. That Allah is really mysterious, but he is indeed our friend. Walter stood up and said, I have secretly recorded what happened with message magic, including every word that everyone said. When I go back, I will let teacher take a closer look. Maybe he will find some secrets. It's getting late. Let's part here. You go to Uruk. Be careful. I did not know that Walter had secretly recorded the scene of their encounter with the Scorpion King, intending to let Goliath analyze it. He and Madanzo continued forward. The sparse grass growing in the desert gradually became a grassland. They could even see the silhouettes of bison. A huge inland lake appeared in front of them. You have a good night's rest today. Meditation can help you recover your magic. How should we go tomorrow? Should we go around the lake or cross it directly? Madanzo looked at the big lake in the distance and said, There may be monsters in the lake, but there are also monsters on the shore. It doesn't matter which way we go. In fact, crossing the lake directly is the shortest time and the most dangerous. But we don't have a boat. If we swim with water magic, it will be more troublesome if we encounter monsters in the water. I laughed. We do have a boat, and it is very strong and safe. It can also cover us. It is safer than walking on land. Madanzo was surprised. Boat? Where is it? Ah, God, you are amazing. At this moment, Schrödinger suddenly poked his head out of the leather bag, stretched out his front paws and stretched out a long yawn, as if he had just woken up from a dream. A few days ago, when they encountered danger in the desert, and Madanzo did not notice, and the cat would call out in advance. But today, when they encountered a powerful enemy like the Scorpion King, it did not make a sound. Perhaps it was because of the strength of the Scorpion King, but Schrödinger felt that it did not matter whether he reminded it or not, or he did not want to appear in front of Walter and Raphael. It hid in the leather bag motionlessly as if it had disappeared, and only now did it come out. Madanzo was almost startled by it. He greeted half-jokingly, Kitty, long time no see. Schrödinger could not be bothered with it. He jumped down and found a comfortable grass nest to lie down. I laughed. Schrödinger is tired. Let's set up camp here today, and cross the lake after daybreak. Madanzo, there may be monsters in the lake. You must be prepared for another fierce battle. The camping spot Schrödinger chose was very good. After eating and resting, it was a peaceful night. After daybreak, 2 people and a cat continued their journey. Not far ahead, they arrived at the place where I escaped from the underworld. At that time, it was Schrödinger who used unimaginable power to guide him, and the cat was exhausted and fainted for many days. Now that they were back in the same place, he and the cat were full of energy, a far cry from when they were in a sorry state. The destination of this trip was the disappeared town of Duk and the savages deep in the mountains. That was where he and Schrödinger used to live. Today they were going back again. Everything had changed so much that it made one feel endless sorrow. He was still the lonely traveler. Although he had lost his home, he still had everything in his heart. The experience of traveling the continent had given him more depth. It was not that one could not look back in life. The same scenery could always be lingered on, but it depended on whether one could read more from it. When they arrived at the lake, I threw out a bone and it unfolded into an invisible boat. The boat was empty, and all the belongings were stored in Ventisalis. Schrödinger jumped onto the boat lightly and squatted in front. I also boarded the boat with the iron staff in his hand. This scene was so familiar. It was as if time had returned to the day when they set out to find Bear. I was a little distracted. He stood there for a long time before he noticed that one person was missing. He turned around and shouted, "Madanzo, what are you doing? Why haven't you boarded the boat yet?" Madanzo was dumbfounded. He stood there for a long time without saying a word. He even forgot to open his mouth. Only when he heard us call did he come back to his senses. He exclaimed, "My God! What kind of artifact is this? It's so much more amazing than the wind-riding shuttle." I waved his hand and said, "Don't ask what it's called. For me, it's my life. Come on, pick up your staff. Today, you will be in charge of steering this boat across the lake." Madanzo jumped onto the boat and waved his staff nervously to control this invisible space. When I was still a level 3 magician, he could control the invisible boat very smoothly. Now that Madanzo had reached the peak of level 5, he quickly mastered the trick. This invisible boat was very easy to control. It was simply the most magical artifact in the world. It glided across the lake like a flying fish. Madanzo gradually felt high-spirited as he steered the boat. He shouted to Ah excitedly, "My God! Can this boat of life fly?" Ah replied, "In theory it can fly, and it's much easier to control than the wind-riding shuttle. However, the space it has to spread out is very large, and the law of space is also very large. With my current strength, it's still very difficult for me to make it fly." Madanzo waved his staff and said, "I feel like it's about to fly. This feeling of riding the wind is really satisfying." He deliberately controlled the boat to float on the surface of the water, drawing all kinds of curves like a bird flying freely in the sky. I also felt that it was fun, so he smiled and said, "Be careful, there might be water monsters in the lake." The invisible boat sailed across the blue lake, rippling in the water. The water was very clear, and from time to time, a variety of large fishes could be seen swimming in the water. The wind wasn't strong, and there were a few cotton-like white clouds floating in the sky. In the distance, there were grasslands and mountains. In fact, the mountains were very far away. After crossing the lake, there was still a few hundred miles, and climbing up the mountains was the majestic Saya Plateau. The grasslands only surrounded the lake, and further away was the invisible swamp and forest where monsters roamed. When they reached the center of the lake, they could feel that the water was obviously cold, and there were almost no schools of fish. Madanzo exclaimed in surprise, "Why are there no monsters in the lake? I still want to show off my skills with this magical boat." Before he could finish, he heard Schrodinger's lazy cry. Then a few large fishes leaped out of the lake, splashing up a lot of water as they fled in panic. Ai tapped his staff and said, "As you wish. Get ready to show off your skills." Madanzo also sensed a powerful force in front of him. Just as he raised his staff, a white line appeared on the surface of the water, and a huge tail suddenly flew out. The tail was as thick as a man, and was covered with dark green scales. It swung out from the water, but it didn't cause much noise. In an instant, it arrived above the invisible boat. Ai was familiar with this scene. He had seen it before on the Euphrates River. He shouted, "This is the descendant of Humbaba, be careful." Even without Ai's warning, Madanzo had already made his move. The huge tail stopped in midair, emitting a sound like shattering glass. A translucent ice shield suddenly condensed in midair, disintegrating under the powerful impact. Ai was indeed a disciple of Ai's sect. Ai had also used this defensive technique on the Euphrates River. Forming an ice shield on the surface of the water was the fastest method. As the ice shield shattered, Madanzo's right hand had already unsheathed his longsword. He leaped into the air and slashed out. This reaction was the same as Ai's, except that Ai's weapon was an iron staff, while Madanzo's was a warrior's sword. The sword landed solidly on the snake's tail. The power of this strike could even split a rock in two, but only a few palm-sized phosphorescent flakes splashed off the snake's body. Yellow ripples spread across the snake's body, and it actually withstood the full force of a 5th-level warrior's strike. Two massive forces collided in midair, and Metatro was forcefully smashed down. The entire invisible ship sank downwards, parting the surface of the water as it was pushed back nearly 100 feet by the impact. Ai shouted, "I told you this is the descendant of Humbaba. It's extremely strong in the water, you can't take it head-on." Madanzo steadied himself and shouted, Is it also a 9-headed snake? You can't even chop off the tail. It's not easy to chop off all 9 heads. Ai replied. It's a 1-headed snake. Humbaba is a 9-headed snake. Do you think you can show off when you meet me? Body arts to defend, divine arts to attack. Let me see how far you've trained in the power of the 2 sides. The giant tail had already retracted into the water. A loud, strange sound came from the depths of the lake. It sounded like muffled thunder, like a cow's roar. 2 huge ugly heads popped out of the water, their jaws wide enough to swallow an adult. Their purple tongues were like blood-stained chains, and their bowl-sized eyes were filled with rage. It was obvious that Madanzo's strike had hurt them. Madanzo shouted. Ai, there's 2 of them. Ai shouted. Not 2, it's a 2-headed snake. Madanzo said. Didn't you say there's only 1 head? Ai shouted. Cut the crap. You're no match for it in the water. Hurry up and get on shore. Madanzo didn't have any other problems, but he was talkative. At this time he was still in the mood to talk to Ai. As he spoke, his hands were not idle. As soon as the snake's head appeared, he quickly steered the invisible ship to retreat. They were in the middle of the lake, so it didn't matter which direction they fled in. But as soon as the ship started moving, there was a huge movement behind them. The water surged up like a mountain, and countless condensed ice came crashing down. Madanzo shouted and waved his staff to the left. The surging lake seemed to be flattened by a giant hand in an instant. The ship forcibly slid a few hundred feet to the side, and was not directly smashed into the bottom of the lake by the giant wave. The edge of the giant ice still swept the invisible ship, and there was a rumbling sound. Fortunately, it was a spatial artifact. If it was a real ship, it would have been smashed. The ship shook violently and Schrödinger, who was squatting at the bow, bounced a few times. He turned back and glared at Madanzo with dissatisfaction, as if scolding him for being too weak. Looking at the cat's appearance, it didn't seem to be afraid at all. Madanzo wasn't in the mood to bicker with the cat. He didn't even have the time to be long-winded. After the giant wave surged up, the thick snake tail once again emerged from the water. The body of this 2-headed strange snake was actually so huge. Its head was 100 feet in front of them, but its tail had circled around from the bottom of the water to launch a sneak attack. Another strike missed, and the strange snake roared again and again. A huge arc appeared on the surface of the lake, and the strange snake's entire body floated up. Unexpectedly, it formed an encirclement around the invisible ship, and was rapidly spiraling and shrinking. It saw that the invisible space where and the others were in was very strange, and wanted to use its huge body to wrap around it and grind it to pieces. Madanzo didn't dare to let the invisible ship be wrapped around by the snake. He shouted loudly and waved his staff with all his might. The water below rapidly surged up like a mountain, and the huge ship was tossed into the air. The ship flew out, and the huge ship landed on the body of the snake that was blocking it. In a flash, it turned into a hard layer of ice, and temporarily froze the snake's body. The invisible ship flew past the snake's encirclement, and landed on the surface of the water. The violent vibrations caused Schrödinger to roll a few times. Madanzo didn't care whether he could walk steadily or not. He waved his staff repeatedly, and a gale rose on the surface of the lake. The invisible ship shot towards the shore like an arrow. Chapter 109. The 2-headed serpent was obviously enraged. It raised both of its heads and chased after them. Its giant tail swayed rapidly on the surface of the water, causing the waves to undulate like it was flying. However, it was still slower than the speed of the invisible ship. Anand and the others were getting further and further away. Watch me say I'll go. The 2 heads of the serpent opened their mouths at the same time, and let out a deafening roar. The roar was accompanied by a tremor that resonated on the surface of the water. Countless scale-like ripples appeared on the surface of the water. The surface of the lake shook, and many fishes popped out of the water with their bellies upturned. They had died a violent death. This resonance with the surface of the water was extremely lethal. Madanzo and the others had the protection of the invisible space, so they weren't hurt. However, the speed of the ship had slowed down. The The surface of the water formed a resistance, and the buzzing air was also obstructed. Madanzo turned around and stood at the stern of the ship. He controlled the invisible ship to break through the obstacles. He waved his staff with all his might, while his other hand gripped his sword tightly. His expression was very solemn. His waving of the staff was not as graceful as usual. It was like holding a heavy brush and painting a wall. It was extremely strenuous. Beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. Every time he waved his staff, the line of sight behind the ship would blur. It was as if space was distorted, and the shockwaves would disappear for a moment. The invisible ship suddenly accelerated forward. Using spatial magic to obstruct the pursuit of the serpent was indeed the most effective method. However, the power of the spatial law was quickly dispersed by the shockwaves. The two-headed serpent was still closing in. A gang had just broken through from the 4th level to the 5th level. He hadn't had the time to train his true strength. When he encountered the serpent in the Euphrates River, he wasn't a match for it at all. He had to use a scroll to deal with it. Now that Madanzo had reached the peak of the 5th level, and he had the protection of the mysterious invisible ship, as long as he didn't make any mistakes, he should be able to put up a good fight against the serpent. But today, the two-headed serpent was obviously much stronger than the one he encountered in the Euphrates River. Gang could see clearly that even if Madanzo had reached the peak of the 5th level, he still wouldn't be able to deal with the serpent. It was already very rare for him to be able to test out the monster snake's strength, and keep playing with it until now. Quiet took out the god's tear and quickly embedded it at the top of the staff. This was the first time he had used the god's tear on a staff. The iron branch staff was finally able to unleash its full power. Looking at the strange snake, it was already very close. Its two huge heads, one on the left and one on the right, formed a pincer attack dozens of feet away. Its eyes were very strange, with one eye on each head being black, while the other was bluish-green. Madanzo shouted, "Oh God, I can't hold on much longer. This strange snake is so strong, how can it know magic? Could it be that it also knows the power of two sides?" Awui was not in the mood to be long-winded. She suddenly shouted, "Stop the boat." Madanzo waved his staff with all his might, and a spatial rift appeared in front of the giant snake. He no longer urged the invisible ship to fly away. The ship continued to drift forward, slowing down on the trembling surface of the lake. The serpent's roar shattered the distorted space, and two heads emerged from the chaos. The scales on the serpent's neck were glowing, yellow and green, as though it was about to cast some kind of divine spell. Just at that moment, a golden light scattered in the air, accompanied by a chant. Strength comes with a strong heart. Who is it that struggles before faith? Who thinks he has broken free from the cage, only to be chained? This was a magic of the Temple of Isis, called the Golden Chain. It was actually a very mysterious high-order spatial magic. Its effect was similar to the advanced magic spatial shackle, but its power was more mysterious and powerful. It was not Crazy Ol who taught it to him. A fan had secretly learned it from the ancient books, and he was able to cast it with ease with the iron staff. The golden light condensed into invisible shackles, binding the two huge heads of the giant snake. The snake struggled on the surface of the water, but its neck seemed to be tightly gripped by two invisible giant hands. Leaped high into the air and waved his staff. Don't forget that he was a level 6 warrior, and his staff was also a weapon. Jumped more than 30 feet high, and his staff heavily hit the junction between the two necks and the snake's body. But there was no splash of snake phosphor, not even a sound. A violent shock wave spread along the snake's body, as if someone had used a sledgehammer to crack open a mining core. It reminded people of the skills of Duk miners. The impact of the staff was really strong. O's body was bounced back and fell back on the ship. The huge invisible ship was thrown back dozens of feet. The 200-foot-long snake's body froze for a moment, as if it was temporarily paralyzed by the shock wave. O's staff could not kill the two-headed snake, and he did not even want to hurt it. He just froze the snake for a moment. A returned to the ship and flicked his staff upwards. The lake water rolled up and encircled the snake's body, forming a huge ice shell. The ice was thick and solid, forming almost instantaneously along with the surge of water, but it did not directly wrap around the snake's body. There was a layer of space between the ice and the snake's body, and a layer of flame rapidly ignited on the snake's body. The flame was light red at first, but quickly turned blue and white, and finally became light gold. A scorching heat wrapped around the ice, but the direction of the flame was directed towards the snake's body. The heat drilled into the scales, and unexpectedly did not melt the outer layer of ice. The two-headed snake hissed in pain, frantically twisting its body. Cracks appeared on the huge ice shell. The flame suddenly disappeared, all drilled into the scales. Cracks appeared on the ice shell due to the snake's struggle, but these cracks quickly mended. The huge ice shell rapidly grew inwards, thickening and finally completely enveloping the snake's body. The snake's body emitted a radiance, dark brown and dark blue, constantly flickering, as though it was resisting the scorching heat with some kind of magic. But in the instant that the ice shell grew and enveloped the snake's body, a series of explosions rang out. The scorching heat and cold clashed, and the ice inside the snake instantly melted into steam. The huge pressure caused the snake's body and ice shell to explode. The snake's scales flew everywhere, and its blood was a mess. But it was still struggling madly. Ah shouted and quickly waved his staff. His movements were very strange. The space around the snake's body twisted and blurred, and countless twisting cracks appeared. Following the explosion of the ice shell, the spatial rift also split apart. The monstrous serpent's body finally broke into pieces, transforming into indistinct bloody fragments that floated on the surface of the lake amidst the crushed ice. It was finally annihilated. Madanzo sat down on the ship and sighed in surprise. "Oh God, you finished it in one move. What kind of magic was that?" I replied, "Song of Ice and Fire." He waved his staff and used Ventusselv to collect all the snake's scales and bones, including 2 tendons and 8 fangs. Madanzo was surprised. "I've never heard of it before." I replied, "I've never heard of it either. I only saw it in a scroll. The scroll was condensed from the writer's mana, and I learned it from the scroll. The snake is dead. Let's continue to the other side of the lake. Don't disturb me for now." I placed his magic staff flat on the deck, as he shut his eyes and entered into a deep meditative state. It was as though he had turned a blind eye to the tragic aftermath of the battle, as though he hadn't made a move at all. Madanzo was puzzled, but he couldn't ask any questions. The battle had exhausted him, and he could only force the ship to slowly drift to the other side of the lake. The lake was huge, and the ship moved very slowly. It took them a day and a night to drift to the other side. I was still sitting there, as if he didn't know what was happening around him. Fortunately, they didn't encounter any other monsters in the lake. Schrödinger turned his body to look at Ah. His expression was complicated, both gratified and worried at the same time. It wasn't that Ah Xiang wanted to wash his hands of the matter at this time, but after he killed the two-headed serpent, he suddenly felt a burst of absent-mindedness. In this absent-mindedness, there was also some kind of enlightenment, as if a window was about to open. He immediately immersed his mind to capture and experience this ray of light. He didn't gain much from this long journey. Of course, the real harvest wasn't the items he collected. Meeting the Scorpion King Sishui, and making that oath, Ah finally solved a question that had been bothering him for a long time. If Crazy Owl and Bear were still here, Ah could clearly tell them that the path they spent their entire lives searching for did exist. The power of two sides wasn't created by Crazy Owl, it had existed since ancient times. From the Scorpion King's tone, it was obvious that he knew this secret. It wasn't just humans. Even a scorpion could become a legendary deity if it reached the end of this path. When Ah boarded the invisible ship again and sailed to the other side, he no longer had any doubts about the answer to this question. Schrödinger unfolded his bones and jumped onto the ship's bow. The ship sailed into the unknown. The reincarnated scene touched Ah. In the lake, he was attacked by the descendants of Humbaba. Ah finally killed the snake, using the Song of Ice and Fire, but without the help of the scrolls. He used the magic he learned from the scrolls, and the secret magic of the Temple of Isis. No one taught him these, including the mining skills of Duk. He didn't get the approval of the gods. I had a feeling that the path to becoming a deity was there, whether the gods existed or not. The legendary deities had only walked this path and passed all kinds of tests that were inconceivable to ordinary people. But these tests were always there, and even the immortal gods could fall. I clearly saw the path he had walked and the future he was going to face. He used to want to see Iko, but when he saw her, things had changed. She was the holy maiden of the Temple of Isis. But he could still look into her eyes calmly. He wanted to go back to Duk, cross the desert, and experience all kinds of dangers. The other side was the legendary land of Marduk, the hometown where he grew up. His wishes and his actions, his pursuit and his path, were far away on the other side. It was like the fusion of fate and reincarnation. It could be said that this was the fusion of faith and belief. The ship suddenly shook. It was not because it encountered a monster, but because it ran aground on the shore of the lake. Ao opened his eyes, stood up, and walked down the ship with his staff in hand. The scene in front of him was a bit like a dream. He finally set foot on this land. The feeling of stepping on the ground was so real that he almost fell. Madanzo, who was following behind, was already exhausted. Seeing that Ao was about to fall, he hurriedly reached out to help him. However, Ao turned around and stood still. He asked, "Have we arrived? Isn't this nonsense? It's not like I can't see it." Madanzo panted and replied, "Yes, we've finally reached the shore. I almost fell down from exhaustion." "Ah, you're finally awake." Ao glanced at Madanzo and said, "Well, you look like you can't hold on much longer. Let's go back to the ship. You have a good rest. I'll steer the ship." Madanzo asked in confusion, "We've finally reached the shore. Where do you still want to steer the ship?" "Ah," who had just stepped off the ship, turned around and got back on the ship. He replied, "The way forward, of course." Madanzo had to get back on the ship and sit down to catch his breath. Schrödinger did not get off the ship. It looked at Ao with a smile in its eyes. Then something amazing happened. Ao raised his staff forward, and the invisible ship actually went ashore. It glided forward on the soft grassy mud. Occasionally, it would hit bushes and rocks. The ship floated up lightly and just brushed past the treetops. It looked like it was still sailing in the water. Madanzo was stunned. "My God, what kind of power is this? Your magic power has grown so much overnight." Ao shook his head. "My magic hasn't grown much. After yesterday's battle, it hasn't even fully recovered. It's just that the way I use my power is different. The perfect fusion of my soul and power. It's no longer a power that has been awakened, but a power that belongs to me naturally. That's why I can do things that I couldn't do before." Madanzo blinked. "Ah, I don't quite understand." Ao explained, "It's like opening a window. I can see the world and myself more clearly, just like the ship under your feet. If you can't find it, how can you control it? Go one step further and integrate it into your power. It's like a part of your body and mind. Only then will you be able to do more. Low-grade, mid-grade, and high-grade magic are all different ways of using power. Awakening, using, transforming, and finally, it has to be integrated with the body and mind. It's as if it's innate. There's no need to think too much about it." Madanzo was stunned for a long time before he reacted. He asked, "Have you already?" Ao nodded lightly. There was no surprise in his voice. "Yes, I have already achieved the 7th level. I'm a supreme sorcerer. According to the law of the power of two sides, I will also be a supreme warrior." Madanzo exclaimed, "Ah, you must be a god born on earth. As far as I know, you are the youngest supreme sorcerer or mage in the world. At the same time, you are also the youngest supreme warrior." On this day, Achia turned 18 years old and finally broke through the 7th level of the power of two sides. Crazy Ol once said that on this day, I would no longer be afraid of his identity as a sorcerer. No matter which city the shrine was, they would be willing to recruit him. Not only would they give him a noble birth, but they would also enjoy an honorable status. The day had finally come. But Ao smiled bitterly when he thought of Crazy Ol's message. The situation was a little different from what he had expected. Ao could no longer appear as a supreme sorcerer, because he was also a supreme warrior. On the Dubhe continent, no one had ever heard of someone who could master this power. He had already appeared as a warrior in the Temple of Isis. Even if he became a supreme warrior, it was impossible for him to become a supreme mage at the same time. If this secret were to be exposed, one could imagine what kind of uproar it would cause, and perhaps even the punishment of the gods. If he returned to the Temple of Isis, he could only appear as a supreme warrior. This was exactly what Maria wanted. But in other places, a 7th-level supreme sorcerer would indeed have a lot of convenience. At least he could appear as Allah, and did not have to hide his magic too much. Thinking of this, he turned to Madanzo and said, "You don't have to envy anyone's achievements. Rest well, feel the recovery of your strength, and you will have new discoveries. This is the most important thing for you now." Madanzo sat down to rest, and also entered a state of meditation. He was so tired that he could hardly move, but his mouth was not idle just now. I drove the invisible ship through the soft mud and long grass. After passing the small grassland by the lake, an endless swamp appeared in front of him. Everywhere was bubbling mud, large pools, and trees above the water. It was impossible to pass through on foot, and there was no way to go. The newly advanced supreme sorcerer drove the invisible ship, choosing to travel between the swamp and the water. He glided and flew with 2 people and a cat, almost completely ignoring the difficulties and rugged terrain. I was also familiarizing himself with the power that had just integrated into his body and mind. Although it was not strong, it was a completely different feeling. He seemed to have entered a new world, and the world in front of him was exactly the lost home he wanted to find. I and Madanzo did not say a word, but Schrödinger yawned and meowed twice in dissatisfaction. I thought that another monster had appeared, but after activating detection magic for a long time, he did not find any movement. Schrödinger raised his voice and meowed twice, and then he reacted and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's been 2 days and 1 night. I only cared about the journey and forgot about other things. Don't worry, I'll find a place to stop and give you some good wine. You've worked hard these 2 days." I was already a rare supreme sorcerer and supreme warrior on the continent. No matter which identity he appeared in, he would enjoy a respected status wherever he went. But I was still the miner from Duk, and Schrödinger was still the arrogant cat. He did not take a supreme sorcerer and a supreme warrior seriously. He squatted there and nodded with satisfaction, waiting for Ah to prepare good wine for him. I'm still out of town, so I borrowed the computer to find a place to write in my spare time. There is only one last day of this month. Please give me your monthly ticket. Chapter 110. Within the swamp, there were patches of land protruding out of the water. Treading on it wouldn't sink, and lush vegetation grew over it like isolated islands of varying sizes. As the water level hadn't receded for a long time, the trees weren't too tall, and served as a hiding and resting place for many wild animals. This was not the final landscape after the flood receded. Surrounded by the charcoal marsh in the west, the mountains of the Euphrates Valley in the east, the Saya Plateau in the north and the Saya Desert in the south, thousands of miles of fertile land were still forming. It would take a few years before passage would be unimpeded. Even then it would not be easy to reach here. I found a dry and high slope exposed to the water, and used gas magic to send out shock waves to scare away the wild animals here. Then he stopped the invisible ship in a flat area. Seeing that Madanzo was still sitting quietly in the ship, he did not put away the space, and only brought Schrödinger down to cook. I roasted a fresh snake with all kinds of spices. He had been with Schrödinger for so long, but actually did not know what a cat liked to eat. Everything was made according to the cat's taste. But Schrödinger seemed to enjoy the delicacies of the human world the most. Of course, there was also good wine. When I left Montefiore, he specially bought the best wine. Although I was young and rarely drank, his taste was absolutely superb. The town of Duk once sold the best wine in the continent, and his father was the most famous drunkard in the town. Therefore, regardless of the price of the wine he bought, the taste was absolutely unquestionable. Perhaps this was the wine that satisfied Schrödinger the most. Apart from roasting the snake and the wine, I also cooked a pot of fragrant fruit and vegetable beef soup, processed with secret magic pine. This was his best culinary skill. Schrödinger had not eaten for almost 3 days. The man and the cat ate happily. At dusk, Madanzo finally opened his eyes, sniffed his nose, stood up and walked down the ship. What is so fragrant? There's even wine. This will attract the nearby monsters. I smiled. But Schrödinger is hungry. No matter what, we have to eat. How is your recovery? If there are monsters, can you defeat them? Madanzo said with a bitter face. After coming ashore, my strength has been exhausted. Just now, I only recovered less than 10%. Of course it's no problem to deal with ordinary beasts, but if it's a powerful monster, I can't take it. Let me eat something first. Schrödinger did not need a cup of wine, but directly held the bottle. He drank directly of wine of the wine. The wine of the bottle was fragrant. This monster looked like both a lizard and a crocodile, but its tail was very long, almost taking up half of its body length. Its long tail was segmented like a scorpion's tail, and its tip was curved. It was about 3 feet long. They poked their heads out of the swamp and saw the fire on the high slope, but did not dare to approach. Madanzo was already frightened by the scorpion and snake. He held his staff in one hand and his sword in the other, and stood guard for a long time. Only then did he realize that these scorpion dragons were very timid and weren't very aggressive animals. He sat down and drank his soup before sighing. "Oh God, you told me about the legend of the ancient war of the gods. The gods created 9 types of monsters, one of which was the scorpion dragon. But these scorpion dragons don't seem very strong. How could they participate in the war of the gods?" Schrödinger stared at Metatro with a look of disdain as he hugged the bottle with his front paws. The scorpions we encountered in the desert were also vulnerable in the war of the gods, but the scorpion king Jirishui is definitely qualified, and I think the same is true of Humbaba, the 9-headed serpent. I'm afraid some of the 9 types of monsters created by the gods were destroyed in the war of the gods. Even if Humbaba survived, he was later beheaded. I've seen Humbaba's descendant in the Euphrates River. It was a terrible mutant water dragon. The 2-headed serpent we encountered today was even more powerful. So it occupied the lake. But I don't think all the monsters' descendants are so fierce, unless we meet the original 9 types of monsters, such as the Scorpion King Giraffe. I'm not sure if the original scorpion dragons are still around, but I've seen them before. They're like ordinary ironbacks, not very scary. Madanzo slapped his thigh and said, "When you mention ironbacks, I think of El March. Ordinary ironbacks aren't that scary, but those mutant ironbacks are. Especially the Ironback King, El March. He almost killed me and Link. Elmar was not a monster created by the gods. It was a mutated Ironback King. It had amazing strength, and could even instinctively cast divine spells. I have an idea, but I don't know if it's right." "Tell me if you have an idea." Madanzo rubbed the back of his head and said, "Humbaba and Giraffe may not have been created by the gods. They're mutant beast kings. Their origin is similar to Elmar's. They've gained intelligence and instinctive power. It was the gods who discovered and trained them, just like how the Scorpion King trained the giant scorpion army. Ashen, didn't you also teach me the Cloud Dream body art and divine skills? Elmar can understand your words. Although it can't learn body arts and divine arts like humans, it can train its innate power according to the method you taught it." Aragorn nodded. "Your idea makes sense. But Elmar can't speak, and it can't transform into a human like the Scorpion King. If one day it can transform into a human, it may be able to systematically train the power of 2 sides. I remember the Scorpion King once said that humans have a godlike body, so it should be the most convenient way to train this power." Speaking of this, Madanzo suddenly laughed. Aragorn glared at him and said, "Your laugh is so strange. What are you thinking about? Why do I feel that it's not a good idea?" Metatro chuckled and said, "I still don't know if Elmar is male or female. If he can transform into a human one day, I don't know if he'll be a man or a woman. He can't be like those scorpions who stroll around naked. If such a day really comes, won't you become one of those ancient gods who created monsters?" Aragorn also laughed. "I'm also curious. Let's wait and see. This time when we go to Link's tribe, I plan to let Link teach Elmar how to write. It will be more convenient for him to learn more advanced magic in the future. I have seen the ancient books of shape-shifting magic in the Temple of Isis. Its foundation is message magic. It starts as an illusion, but when it reaches a higher level, it becomes more than just an illusion. I always feel that it is not for humans to practice. If Elmar can learn it, I can let him try. Madanzo asked curiously, can the Ironback also write? It can't speak yet. Aragorn can try. Elmar is a mutant Ironback king. It can also understand my words. At the same time, Aragorn glanced at Schrödinger and thought to himself, this cat can't speak either, but it can even write hieroglyphs. It's not impossible for the Ironback. Schrödinger was holding the bottle and drinking happily, ignoring the conversation between the two. Madanzo asked again, Aragorn, you haven't answered my question yet. I asked it when I was fighting the two-headed snake. That snake also knows magic, and it is as strong as its physical strength. Is it also practicing the power of two sides? Who taught it? Aragorn fell into deep thought. After a long time he replied, maybe it is just an instinctive awakening of power. Elmar can also use skills similar to earth elemental magic, but it was not the priests who taught them the power. They don't have systematic experience, so it is very difficult for them to master the power. But on the other hand, they are not bound by experience, so they don't care about body arts or magic. Instead, they practice the power of two sides. Madanzo frowned and said, Elmar's situation was like this at the beginning. Is it the same for Humbaba and the Scorpion King? If Elmar didn't meet you, I'm afraid he will always be an Ironback in the pool. Scorpion King and Humbaba may have been taught by the gods. They are not human, so their path of practice is also different from that of humans. The so-called power of two sides is just my conclusion. It doesn't matter what it is called. The gods don't want it to be spread in the human world, so we have to be careful. Madanzo nodded and said, I've always been careful. Even in front of Princess Cicely, I didn't show any flaws. You should remind Link. In fact, I've always thought that the two-headed snake's death was not worth it. If it didn't chase us, everyone would be safe. It is not as good as the Scorpion King, but at least it knows how to negotiate. A sighed and said, it had gained simple intelligence and realized that it had grasped great power. It had desires that were beyond its animal instincts, so it became the king of the lake. However, this power ended up harming itself in the end, Madanzo said. It must have thought that it has us, so it chased us relentlessly. But it didn't expect you to kill it in one move. Aragorn suddenly thought of something and solemnly warned. I've told you before, try not to kill. If you have to kill, try to use your strongest power. But sometimes the strongest power is also the weakest power. If you fight endlessly and launch countless attacks, the power you use will be much greater than a fatal blow. We will encounter monsters along the way. If we fight like this every time, I'm afraid we won't be able to reach our destination. We have to be careful and try not to get into any conflicts. It's best if we don't fight. They continued their journey after dawn. After walking for nearly 100 miles through the swamp, they arrived at a grassland and shrubs. This land had only been out of the water for less than a year, so it had yet to form a lush forest. As they walked through the shrubs and weeds, Aragorn kept the invisible ship. He didn't want to waste his magic power for nothing. There were many wild buffaloes on the grassland. They were as tall as a human, and their curved horns extended forward. They were very docile, leisurely grazing in herds. Madanzo said, the horns of these buffaloes are really special. If they charge in herds, it would be a very terrifying scene. Are they the descendants of one of the 9 legendary monsters, the wild buffaloes? Aragorn replied, I've seen these buffaloes in the mountains. They usually don't attack people, but when they are disturbed and run in herds, their hooves and horns are very dangerous. Let's stay away from them and not provoke them. They quietly passed through the herd of buffaloes. Madanzo suddenly opened his mouth and pointed into the distance. Aragorn, what do you see over there? There was another buffalo in the distance. It was much larger than a male elephant, and its huge horns were curved like a giant bow. The tips of its horns gleamed with a cold light. As it walked through the grassland, it looked like a moving mountain. It was a very frightening sight. However, many birds landed on its body. The giant buffalo looked very peaceful. It looked up at Aragorn and Medanzo in the distance, then lowered its head and continued to nibble on the shrubs as if nothing had happened. Aragorn said, "This must be the legendary wild buffalo." Medanzo stuck out his tongue. "That's a really big word. Could it be the wild buffalo created by the gods?" Aragorn didn't look like it. The 9 monsters created by the gods all had the power to participate in the War of the Gods. This buffalo should be its descendant, or a variant of the wild buffalo king. We can just go around it. Be careful, don't step on cow dung. The 2 of them passed through the grassland. The soil in front of them became wet again, and when they stepped on it, it would sink up to their knees. However, this kind of mud could not hinder Aragorn and Medanzo. They only left 2 lines of shallow footprints on the muddy ground, and their figures gradually disappeared into the distant horizon. A night passed, but the footprints did not completely disappear. At noon the next day, 2 black dots appeared on the horizon. The black dots quickly grew bigger. It was actually Medanzo and Aragorn who had returned, and they were still running. An unpleasant hissing sound came from behind them. When they looked up, they saw a terrifying scene. A monster was in hot pursuit. It was the legendary giant swamp snake. This serpent wasn't as large as the 2-headed serpent, but it was still over 60 feet long. Its body was as thick as a bucket, and there was a foot-tall bright red tumor on its head, shaped like a male's crown. What was more frightening was that although the snake did not have a long body, it had a pair of membrane-like wings. When spread out, they were more than 30 feet wide, like the wings of a giant bat. Its tail dragged along the ground as it swam, while its upper body flapped its wings to soar in the air. The flapping of its wings carried fine wind blades, slicing up grass and shrubs wherever it passed. Aragorn said as he ran, "I told you to be careful not to provoke monsters. You've provoked this big guy again, and it's a mutated giant swamp snake with wings. Fortunately, it's not the legendary flying snake king." Medanzo mumbled, "I really didn't mean it. I just took a dip in the water. I didn't expect it to come out. I was almost scared to death." "Aragorn, I told you to handle it, and you did it just like that? We've run so far back, and we've wasted a day's journey." Medanzo's face was bitter. "Aragorn, you're not willing to help, and I've only recovered less than 20% of my strength. How can I fight it? I think this snake is the leader of the monsters in the swamp. Let's lure it here, and we'll be able to return unimpeded." As he spoke, the 2 had already dashed past the herd of buffaloes. The winged snake had also chased after them, and the terrifying commotion alarmed the herd of buffaloes that were grazing. Many of the buffaloes began to run in panic, and many of them blocked the path of the strange snake. The hooves and horns of the buffaloes were fatal to humans, but the gigantic winged snake was completely unafraid. With a flap of its wings or a sweep of its long tail, the buffaloes in front of it were sent flying far away. The herd of buffaloes became even more panicked, and let out waves of terrified cries as they ran. An earth-shattering roar resounded from afar, and the earth seemed to tremble. As it turned out, the gigantic mutated bull had discovered the commotion here. It lowered its head, raised its hooves, and charged over with all its might. Medanzo, who was running away, whispered, "Aragorn, speed up and turn the corner. Let's get out of the way, and let the monster fight the monster." Aragorn grabbed Medanzo's arm and suddenly sped up. At the same time, he used the stealth magic. His figure was so fast that he was like a wisp of smoke, faintly discernible. He circled around and slipped away among the galloping buffaloes. The wild buffaloes that were rushing toward them just happened to encounter the giant swamp snake. They returned the way they came, and behind them came the roars of the wild buffaloes and the hisses of the giant snake. Smoke and dust rose from the grassland, and the wind blew violently. The uprooted shrubs flew into the air one after another. The 2 big guys were fighting. Medanzo, who had already run far away, said with lingering fear, "What do you think of these 2 monsters? Which one of them is going to win?" Aragorn replied, "This is not the territory of the giant swamp snake. When 2 powerful monsters suddenly fight, they usually won't fight with their lives on the line. One will only beat the other back. We'd better take advantage of the fact that the swamp snake is not here, and leave quickly. They walked in this treacherous wasteland for a few more days, trying their best to avoid all kinds of dangers. If they really could not avoid it, they would pick up weapons and fight. Aragorn did not let Madanzo fight again. Whenever they encountered a situation, he would personally resolve it with his iron staff. Along the way, he recorded the terrain and information of the monsters. One day, they finally arrived at the old site of the town of Duk. This place had just emerged from the water not long ago. It was a huge island surrounded by swamps and jungles. The soil was black and very fertile. It was already overgrown with weeds. Calculating the area, this isolated island was more than enough to accommodate thousands of people. And as the flood finally receded, thousands of miles of fertile land would be connected. Aragorn stood in his hometown with his staff in hand. His eyes were filled with tears and he was silent for a long time. A cat was squatting at his feet. There was even a hint of melancholy in Schrodinger's eyes. Aragorn stood from noon to sunset, staring blankly at the wasteland without saying a word. It was not until dusk that Madanzo asked in a worried tone, "Aragorn, is this our destination, the town of Duk?" Aragorn wiped the corners of his eyes and nodded. "Yes, this is the town of Duk." Mountain torrents rushed down from the Saya Plateau. Everyone, including their houses, cattle and sheep, was swept away. Nothing is left. Mud has covered the original land. We are standing on it now. Madanzo said softly, "Aragorn, don't be too sad. You are back after all. In the future, this place will become a prosperous home again. Your wish will come true." Chapter 111. That night, they rested on the land of Duk. Amon and Madanzo talked about the other purpose of this trip, which was to bring the people of Link's tribe here to build a village. The cavemen lived a hard life in the mountains. There was no suitable land for farming, and hunting was dangerous. Since the flood, many roads in the mountains had been cut off. Many beasts had become extinct. Some caveman tribes had been completely wiped out. Link's tribe lived in an even more difficult environment. If they hadn't caught enough beasts during the flood and learned how to make meat floss that could be stored for a long time, it would have been very difficult for them to survive until now. Link had led his people to catch many young beasts to raise, so that his people could barely survive. In fact, Link had long wanted to lead his people out of the mountains and find a fertile land to live in. Now the opportunity had come. He reminded Amon, "You said that this land belongs to the Dushians, and you want the cavemen to build a village here. Won't there be any conflicts between your people and Link's people?" Amon asked Metatro, "You said that this land belongs to the Dushians." Amon replied, "I've thought about this a long time ago. Don't worry. The land of Duk, including the farmlands and mines outside the town, can be checked. There used to be more than 2,000 people living here, but now there are less than 100 of them. These lands belong to them, and Link's people will not occupy them. The fertile land that has surfaced is much larger than the original Duk land. Link's people can cultivate and reproduce for generations." Madanzo narrowed his eyes. "It's not easy for dozens of people to come all the way here. It's true that someone should build a village first to provide shelter. This place is full of monsters. We need to unite to survive and have a better future." Amon nodded. "The monsters are not the only threat. As the flood recedes, this place will become 1,000 miles of fertile land, which can accommodate millions of people. I'm afraid that no power on the continent will give up this territory, so there will be disputes. But no matter what, my people only built their homes. Madanzo, I have a mission for you. When Link and the others arrive, help Link train warriors, forge weapons, and build defenses. Make all the necessary preparations. They are the best craftsmen." When the sun rose the next day, Amon set off again with Schrödinger on his shoulder. Leaning on his iron stick, he crossed several swamps still surrounded by water, and entered the jungles of the Euphrates Valley, just as he did when he first left Duk. Madanzo advised, "Don't you want to stay in your homeland for a few more days?" Amon replied, "I'm already here, and I'll be back again. I know how to remember it." After the flood, many roads in the mountains were cut off. In many places, narrow lakes were formed between two mountains. Amon and Madanzo took turns to take the mountain road and the water road. Finally, they reached the plateau where Link's tribe was located. When they appeared at the entrance of the tribe, everyone was stunned. The whole tribe came to greet them. They knelt together as if they were welcoming the arrival of a god. Madanzo hid in a corner, embarrassed, but Schrödinger squatted there and accepted the people's worship. Link hurriedly ran out of the house without putting on his pants. He separated the crowd and grabbed Amon's sleeve. "My God, you're finally back. We've been waiting for you every day." That night, just outside the big cave where the bonfire was burning, the whole tribe held a grand carnival. Amon and Link discussed the relocation, and the cavemen readily agreed. They couldn't wait to leave immediately the next day. Amon, however, told Link not to worry and to leave in 2 months. The whole tribe needed to be prepared for the migration, and Madanzo also needed to recover his strength here. After nearly 2 years, Link had already achieved the 5th level of the power of 2 sides. When he heard that Madanzo had also achieved the 5th level, he said proudly, "It seems that we're about the same. You've been staying with Ammonius all the time, but you're not much stronger than me." Amon smiled and said, "Really? You'll know about Madanzo's situation soon. You haven't forgotten to work hard." Link replied, "Of course. Since you left, I haven't stopped practicing the power of 2 sides for a day." Amon nodded with satisfaction. "That's good. You'll have a test soon. What about Elmar, the Ironback King? I heard that you can't find an opponent in the mountains to train with, so you often practice with Elmarch." Link replied with some embarrassment. "Originally, if it was a one-on-one fight, I would be a little stronger than Elmar, but he also has the help of 4 big Ironbacks, so they are a little stronger than me together." Amon smiled. "Don't say it, I understand all. You didn't take advantage of him once. I'll give you a task during this time. Don't fight with Elmar anymore. Teach him to write, just like I taught you." Link opened his mouth wide and shouted, "What? Teach Elmar to write? Can the Ironbacks also write?" Madanzo slapped him. "Why not? We met the Scorpion King in the desert, and he could talk in human form. There were 2 female scorpions in human form next to him. You didn't see them. They came out without clothes, and their bodies." Amon interrupted him. "Elmar is very smart. You are still no match for him, which means that he understands what I taught him at the beginning, and is also practicing in his own way. It's not impossible for him to learn to write. In the future, he is more likely to be as powerful as the Scorpion King, and be the best guardian of his people." Link asked, "You also met the Scorpion King? The experience of leaving the mountains was really wonderful. You must tell me about it." Amon patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, let Madanzo tell you slowly. This time I want to teach you something new. The focus is on making various kinds of weapons and magic tools. The practice of the power of 2 sides can't rely too much on external things. After all, it's not your own power. It can even lead to obsession and greed. But the process of making things is a kind of training for your magic power and will." Amon lived in the caveman tribe again. After becoming a supreme mage and a supreme warrior, he had a lot of new insights into the power of 2 sides. He taught Madanzo and Link without reservation. At the same time, he focused on teaching them some processing and refining methods of magic tools. Some of the tools were not yet in the condition to make, but some things could be tried. Amon also made weapons himself. The abnormally hard carapace of the giant scorpions could be made into scales and supplemented with magic processing. Not only could it resist weapons, but it could also absorb and transform energy impacts. It was a very good defensive tool. The phosphorescence of the 2-headed serpent could be preserved after such a violent impact of magic. Naturally, it was very strong and could even resist some of the damage caused by magic. Not only could the phosphorescence be made into scales, but there was also a protruding bone spur in the middle of the fan-shaped scale. When the 2 edges of the scale were ground flat, only the spur was left, and it could be made into very sharp arrowheads. The stinger of the scorpion was also a material for making arrowheads, and this kind of arrowhead was highly toxic. Although the venom left in the stinger could not be used repeatedly, it was powerful enough. Amon also collected the spine and ribs of the two-headed serpent. The ribs could be processed into the spine of a bow, and the spine could be made into the handle of a weapon. These bones could also be made into wands, but the making of wands was much more difficult. Wands had to be processed with living materials. For example, the core of walnut wood that had grown for hundreds of years was the most popular material for making wands. The bones of this monster were even rarer. Amon carefully studied his iron wand and found that it had been processed by Crazy Ol. There were extremely fine growth lines inside, so it could be used as both a weapon and a wand. Amon did not know how to do this. It seemed that he was still far from the top artifact masters on the continent. Link and Medanzo were even worse. Medanzo's power was still recovering. Link first tried to make a tool, starting with the simplest scorpion scale armor. It was not difficult to turn the carapace into a scale armor, as long as one had enough patience. But it was not easy to add magic to it. Link destroyed almost half of the carapace, and it took him a month to successfully make a perfect scorpion scale armor. Such an astonishing waste and extravagance would have made anyone else's heart bleed, but Amon did not care too much. He told Link that this was a necessary process. Any outstanding artificer had to use an astonishing amount of precious materials to build up their skills. As their magic power, level, and skills increased, they would become more and more proficient in crafting artifacts. Only then would they be able to craft even more precious artifacts. The most precious materials in Amon's hands were the 8 fangs and the 2 serpent tendons. He decided to make them himself. Of the 8 snake fangs, 4 were long and 4 were short. Amon started with a simple method. He destroyed 2 of the short fangs and used the other 2 to make 2 curved scimitars. These 2 scimitars were light and sharp, and even had the function of a wand. They could assist in the casting of magic in battle, and naturally had a roaring impact on the mind. He gave the 2 slender scimitars to Medanzo and Link respectively. They were both a beautiful decoration and a good weapon in battle, much stronger than the average warrior's sword. Next, Amon used 4 of the long fangs to make the spine of the bow. Although he was very careful, he still destroyed one. When he used the serpent tendons to make the bowstring, he destroyed even more. The 3 short bowstrings added up to less than 10 feet long, but he used up more than 30 feet of serpent tendons to make it. The power of these 3 bows was quite strong, and ordinary people could not even pull them. They were also a kind of magic artifact that could assist in the casting of water element magic. They could also condense magic arrows out of thin air and shoot them. They were a kind of weapon that could also be used by mages. Naturally, these 3 bows were for Amon, Link, and Medanzo, and they were also equipped with arrows made of serpent phosphor bone spurs. After processing the 2 scimitars, 3 bows, and a batch of arrows, Amon did not do anything else. He gave all the remaining materials to Link. He could make as many things as he wanted, and it would be a practice. When Amon finished processing these artifacts, more than a month had passed, and Medanzo's strength had completely recovered. He was surprised to find that his strength was still increasing, so he came to ask Amon what was going on. Amon smiled and said, "Congratulations, you have already achieved the 6th level. You can practice many high-level magic and body arts. I will teach them to you before I leave." Medanzo was overjoyed. On the side, Link was so envious that he tugged at Amon's sleeve and asked, "Ammonius, when can I also learn high-level magic?" Amon said with a faint smile, "Soon, when you have suffered a lot. It will be almost time. Leading the whole tribe to migrate is not an easy thing. It will depend on whether you can hold on or not. How is Elmar's calligraphy? I want to see it today." Link nodded and said, Soon it can write its own name." That afternoon, the 3 of them left the village and went to the pool where Elmar and the other ironbacks lived. Schrödinger seemed to be very interested in this matter, and trotted behind to watch the fun. When they came to the pool, Amon called out, and the ironback jumped up, wagging its tail in a very affectionate manner, splashing water all over them. The 4 big ironbacks also emerged from the water, and looked at Ammonius with great awe. Amon smiled and said, "Elmar, I heard that you can write your own name. From now on, You are no longer an ordinary beast king, but have mastered the wisdom of the world. Write it for me to see. Elmar nodded very obediently, stretched out a front paw and really wrote a line of words on the ground. Schrödinger, who had been looking at it with wide eyes, suddenly turned his head away and stopped looking. Madanzo also covered his mouth and laughed. Amon frowned and looked a little strange. He said to Link, "How did you teach it? Why did it write it backwards?" Link replied awkwardly, "I taught it correctly, maybe its eyes look different from mine." Amon was stunned for a long time, then suddenly gave Link a punch and said, "Did you stand opposite it when you wrote?" Link slapped his head. "Yes, I treated it like a human. I didn't expect it to be so stupid." Amon glared at him. "It's not Elmar that's stupid, look at how well it learns. It's not your fault, there's usually no chance to write in this mountain. No experience is no experience. You guys go out, I have a few words to say to Elmar alone." Link and Madanzo left the forest and waited on the mountain road outside. Not long after, Amon came out with Schrödinger. He said to Madanzo, "You have already achieved the 6th level of the power of 2 sides. Now go and test out the strength of the Ironback King. I have already told Elmar to use whatever skills you have. Don't hold anything back." Madanzo went in, and not long after he heard roars from the depths of the forest. Waves splashed everywhere, mana surged, and countless broken branches flew out. After about the time of a meal, the movement finally stopped, and Madanzo came out of the forest in a sorry state. Amon asked with a smile, "How was it? Who won and who lost?" Madanzo replied awkwardly, "Actually, if it was a one-on-one fight, I would be a little stronger than Elmar, but she had the help of 4 big ironbacks, so she was a little stronger than me." Amon frowned. "This sounds familiar. Why is it exactly the same as what Link said?" Seeing Madanzo being defeated, Link laughed. "The reason is very simple. We were all taught by the same teacher." Amon glared at him again. "Don't you feel ashamed that Elmar is stronger than all of you? Her strength has improved a lot, and she will play a very important role in the future migration of our people. We will be leaving in half a month. Order the people to quickly pack up, take what needs to be taken, and leave what we don't need." Just as Amon and Madanzo arrived in the town of Duk, Walter and Raphael also arrived in the Cape States and the city of Uruk respectively. Since the communication was cut off by the Great Flood, these 2 cities received messengers from the Hittite kingdom for the first time. They came to convey the greetings of the supreme mage Goliath, and were received politely. Both had a secret letter, and it was stated that only the lord of the city could open it and read it alone. This letter brought unexpected trouble to both messengers. After reading Goliath's secret letter, Roddick sat alone in his room for a long time. He did not summon his subordinates, nor did he consult Julian, the deputy chief priest. He only invited his most trusted aide Aristotle. He handed the letter to Aristotle and said, "Sir, I received a letter, but I don't know what to do with it. Should I give it to the pharaoh to deal with along with the letter? Or should I pretend not to have read it at all?" Aristotle read the letter, and did not speak for a long time. Finally, Roddick could not help but say, "You have always been my most trusted friend, so I will discuss it with you alone, hoping to hear your opinion." Aristotle mused. "It is indeed difficult to discuss such a letter in public. Goliath does not want to be your enemy. The 9th level supreme mage only told you about the future he foresaw and made a suggestion." Roddick sighed. "I have also heard of what is about to happen in the land of Marduk, but I am only the Lord of Cape. Although I do not want to see it, I am powerless to stop the disputes between states." Aristotle. "But Goliath wants to stop it, so he made such a suggestion. I am a person from afar, and from the point of view of a bystander, this supreme mage's compassion is admirable. As for whether it will succeed or not is another matter. At least he wants to do so." Roddick smiled bitterly. "I can't consider his suggestion, and I don't even want people to know that I have heard of it, but I don't want to offend Goliath either, so what do you think should be done?" Aristotle thought for a moment and replied, "Goliath also foresaw that a war between Hittite and Igut is about to break out, which I am afraid neither you nor he can stop. His suggestion can also be considered after the war, when the situation may be different, and there may not even be a need to consider his suggestion. You do not have to give any reply for the time being. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.